Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Muzzle Punch. This week, I've got on my good buddy, good friend of mine, Jeff Krok. Jeff and I went to college together. We met cheerleading. He had been a former gymnast. I was just a big lug, which much hasn't changed in that regard. So Jeff and I met, and you're on a team together. Do different stuff, and you kind of bond somewhat together, but then it would take a few years before Jeff and I kind of really clicked, and that's just the course of your lives as you go through life and as you grow and you change. And Jeff was a political science major, so he and I always kind of connected on that in that regard, on that level. And then Jeff went on to law school. So sitting around thinking, hey, who would be an interesting, fun person to have on who could talk intelligently and at some length and depth about the current state of U.S. politics, specifically the presidential race, because it's at forefront right now, and would be fun and interesting. And hey, lo and behold, he can also talk about gymnastics at a pretty deep level, because Jeff was a high-level gymnast. Very skilled, very capable. He coached it. He knows the sport both as a player and as an observer, well-informed, intelligent observer. So to ask Jeff about it and to talk to Jeff about it was fun and interesting, and I really enjoyed having him on. I hope you all enjoy this podcast. It was fun to record. It was interesting. It was stimulating because, like I said, Jeff's got a good brain, and he can talk about this stuff at a good, deep level. And we can go back and forth, and we had a lot of common understanding of some of the deeper ideas and philosophies and theories that kind of underpin our system of politics. So we kind of dug into that a little bit, and it was fun. And I hope that all of you find it as interesting as I did and as fun as I did. So without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Muzzle Punch, and welcome to the episode talking to Jeff Krok.
Break it down like this.
No problem. All units stand by. 7-0 receiving a 34 with a weapon. 1549 East 18th Street. 1549 East 28th.
There you go. We're live. So now we're on.
Welcome.
Why, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me, Jeff.
Yeah.
What do you think of the current state of American politics?
Wow. Talk about...
We're going to jump right in.
Yeah, leading in with the knockout.
Just going to jump
punch.
into the deep end right away.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's pretty terrifying.
Okay.
I don't even know where to formulate my words with that. So, the current state of American politics. I don't like Hillary. I don't like Donald Trump.
Okay. Interesting.
Do
you not trust her because she's a lawyer?
I don't trust her because, the emails, the Benghazi stuff, she's a politician. She's just whatever. So I work for a government. I work for local government.
Yep.
So I work with people who are not career politicians, but who are
aspiring
politicians. Yeah, well, some of them
local level.
Yeah, local stuff. And so, I get it that politics is, about relationships and whatever. But when relationships are built on money, I think we have a real problem. Like a lot of movies on Netflix, we stream Netflix. We cut cable. It's the best decision we've ever made.
Yeah, we have only basic cable.
Yeah.
And we have basic cable because our internet's tied to it, so you can't get away from it. But
right.
Yeah, we have a smart TV now, and that shit's got the Netflix button.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's cool. That's amazing as fuck. But yeah, I use my Xbox. I stream Hulu.
Sure.
I stream, I remember when Hulu first came out, and it was really kind of underground and all that, and now it's mainstream. Yeah, between Netflix, Hulu, and even Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You don't need.
So we do Netflix and we do whatever the basic and internet or whatever. And I like to watch. There's a few videos out about. There's one in particular that I watched called "We're Not Broke," which is an amazing documentary if you're into that stuff. I am.
We're Not Broke. I don't know if I've seen that one.
Yeah, it was very, very good. I thought it was very good, and it was a fascinating look at how government, Democrats and Republicans, point the finger at each other, and they do that because they get paid off by big organizations.
Yeah,
GE, the cars,
yeah, special interest groups.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And how if you look at like our government. We're not broke.
Or more accurately, I guess, lobbyists in this case. But
yeah,
they represent special interest. I mean, nowadays, special interest groups has taken on a different meaning with Citizens United and with PACs and stuff like that, and super PACs and things like that. So I think now, like, special interest groups is kind of a catch-all phrase. And I don't think a lot of people, like, I can say that to you and you're like, right. Like, we can, there's common understanding of the more nuances of the terms that you appreciate and I appreciate. You having a background in poli-sci as your undergrad and then your law degree. Mine's history, the minor philosophy. So there's a lot of overlap between us.
Yep.
But it's interesting you bring up, okay, so now I'm going to kind of take a turn. And that's how this is going to kind of go.
That's fine.
So you bring up money.
Yes.
So let's talk Citizens United.
Okay.
Which, in my opinion, probably one of the most egregious things that happened in the past 20 years.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would say before that was the disassembling of Glass-Steagall. Okay. So when this was done under the Clinton administration, under Bill Clinton's administration, so when you disassembled Glass-Steagall and it became open, it became free reign. For the banks, there was almost no constraint for the we'll say the financial sector, because using banks was a different term prior to that, and then your local banks and monopolies and stuff like that getting bought up by bigger banks and centralization of financial services and stuff like that, and things that were built in to protect protect the consumer and the market from greed.
Yep.
But then without disassembling Glass-Steagall and the regulations that kept the financial services in check since the fall and the Great Depression, you need to do that to then set the stage to make Citizens United acceptable by your citizenry. And it's not necessarily a direct line. I'm not talking the conspiracy theory thing. Yeah. I'm talking more like in a sociology kind of construct thing.
Yeah.
These are the things that corporations do, and it's not the guided hand of like the Illuminati or the Bilderberg Group or anything like that. Okay. But this is how the mechanisms and those who are very interested in capitalists, like the free market capitalists, they always have, no matter what the market sector is, an interest in deregulation. And deregulation allows them better access to consumers without filters and without protections. And then that allows for people to become more comfortable dealing more directly with what they perceive to be corporations, and it becomes a little more insidious. Yeah. And then all of a sudden that kind of sets a stage for, well, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you let such and such corporation have a say? It's you can market to them, and you can use all these things to use like sweeping terms like, well, a corporation is an individual.
Right.
Okay, fine. You're right. In a legal term, a corporation is an individual. But there's a whole lot more there that you're getting away with, and people are just filling in the gaps with their ignorance. Yeah. So I wonder because there's been attempts, because this also feeds into campaign finance reform, which campaign finance reform predates Citizens United, because Citizens United just opened up the spigot of money for elections. Yeah. But the money was already there. Lobbyists have been there for a long time. Yeah. And to be honest with you, as dirty as it seems, I'm also fairly conflicted about lobbyists. And I'm not sure regulation, in the sense that most people think, is the way to go with it.
Okay.
I just said a whole lot, and I
Yeah.
know you're processing it, so I know you caught it.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that you said that I agree with, in terms of not necessarily the background of why we got here, but certainly where we are. It reminds me a lot of the notions of social media and all those political cartoons where you see people who are controlled by their iPhones or their
Yes.
whatever computers or whatever. I think that so I teach at a school at a local college, and my kids both are in gymnastics class. We're involved in whatever. I see youth. I see a lot of youth people, and just a majority of them are set up in a system, I think, that numbs them to these, I think you said it best, where it leads to effect. Yeah, I believe there's something insidious going on, whether intentionally or just with ill motives, or not even necessarily ill motives, but self-interested. I think it's all connected.
Well, it is, but it's not orchestrated. That I think that's when I say it's not connected.
I don't know, but I hear what you're saying, and there's no way I could connect the dots. And you said I'm not getting onto a conspiracy theory tangent, but I don't know. I kind of feel like there's an invisible hand out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I just don't know how. I've come to learn that there's no such thing as coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence at all. I just don't. I don't. I believe in karma, but I believe that when shit happens, it doesn't just. Shit happens because somebody made it happen that way.
Oh, well, that, yes, but, and I think there's a big but to that. I think people do things with an intention, absolutely.
Sure.
But what you can never account for, and this is where it goes, this is where I kind of get off the conspiracy theory chain, is second and third order of effects. And those quite often are the things that have the biggest impact.
Sure.
You never see coming. No one ever saw Google coming.
Right.
Even Google didn't see Google coming. No, seriously.
Yeah.
Facebook, probably, if Facebook could never have foreseen the invention of the smartphone, the smartphone and apps and the ability to access the internet truly going mobile changed social media in a way they never conceived. You never would have seen Twitter. You never would have seen Instagram. You never would have all these other feeders, which are not necessarily the monster that Facebook is, but they are part of that engine that drives. And these are second and third order effects. When the iPhone came out, no one ever thought of these things in the same way. You didn't think there was going to be an Instagram. They came up. These were ideas that came up in garages who were separate from a lot of the world. But they were observing and they were smart, and things happened. And I think it is, but it isn't coincidence. I do believe that the universe works on chaos, or at least within the realm of chaos that our mind is able to perceive. Everything in nature has a system. Everything evolves. We see it with. They're applying evolution to the universe. So physics has taken over it. I mean, evolution has been cross-pollinated into almost every form of science. So that's a recognition that there is some kind of system or design, even if it's beyond our full capacity to understand, because we do have limited horsepower in our brains. And I think that's kind of how things are. I mean, they quasi talked about it in that movie with the dude from The Hangover, where he took the pill and he got really smart.
Oh, Limitless?
I never saw Limitless
that.
Or something like that. But the main character, near the end, he had taken enough of this where the effects had happened. Yeah. So he was able to, what seemed as though, predict the future, but it wasn't. He was processing information and making predictions at an accelerated rate beyond what others were. And he would just tweak his equation, which was a real world going on, in order to make these things happen. Yeah. So that's kind of what the premise was, which is accepting that idea that nothing is coincidental. You're right. Yeah. But sometimes is it the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th order of effects. And at that point, I would say, well, at that point, it kind of, as a catch-all, becomes coincidence. Because it's going to become very muddied in that spider web of trying to go back to the cause.
Yeah. Hard to debate you on that, I suppose. Well,
I've thought a lot about it, and I don't disagree with you. It's just hard for me to, especially, this is my feeling when it comes to, and this is more historically based. If you go back to the late 19th, early 20th century, and you look at the rise of Americans out of industrial age, you had three, we'll say three basic sectors that were the powerhouses: the railroads, steel, and the banks. And
oil too, but
well, oil became a rise. Or oil was the early 20th century, but not the late 8th. No one really found the rise of oil comes more along the lines of in concert with the automobile. There's a partnership and a marrying that goes on there.
Yeah.
But those three, your big three, and there's a lot of money in them early on, and that's where the rise of your Rockefellers and your what the hell's the other? I can't remember. Carnegie. Yep. Yeah. So some of your big robber baron names. But the interesting thing is when you go back and read the history of those times, they sometimes were in competition with each other. If you're so your market interest might not meet mine. Matter of fact, your market interest might be detrimental to my market interest. So there's an interesting mechanism that wasn't intended in capitalism, where competing interests in the market for a limited amount of wealth that can be spread around are going to almost keep each other in check. And you still see this today. You see it at the highest levels, because otherwise you wouldn't have billionaires aligning themselves with different political parties. And that's that continued manipulation of, I need my interest to protect my wealth in the market, in my sector of it. And it's not in accordance with yours. Because I would agree, and this is, none of these motherfuckers are benevolent. No. The wealthy, the uber wealthy, the billionaires club, they're interested in keeping that club as small as possible because they want to accumulate as many billions as they can.
Yeah. But didn't you take the long road to get to my argument, which was people are self-interested and therefore...
Yes, but I don't see the hand. That's what I was trying to get to. Like the idea of the idea of the hand. I agree with a lot of it. Where I get off is that in some way it is being coordinated.
But you said yourself the billionaires club, right? The Mark Cubans of the world. Mark Cuban's going to work with whomever.
So long as their interests line up, and that's kind of where this interesting, again, self-interest balance works. And that's a separation for where there's not agreement, there's not accord. And I don't see, and I haven't been able to see how anyone could be so diverse in their interest in wealth that they would be able to hide the fact that they were the one controlling all these different people. Like constantly tweaking, okay, I'm going to put my weight behind this guy because this part of my wealth in this sector of the market needs a little help, and then I'm going to need this one, because that would be that secret hand.
Didn't you just describe Donald Trump's campaign? I mean...
But I don't see Trump as being all that powerful.
Well, okay. Yeah, I agree, but... I mean, I think in the scheme of things, yeah, he's one... but, I mean, how many... He comes out one week and he's attacking this person, and then the next week he's aligned with this person.
I think Donald Trump is a case of megalomania.
Well, yeah, I agree with that as well.
He is, and I mean this, and I'm not trying to be like disparaging. I'm using this in a technical, like clinical sense. I think he is mentally ill.
Okay, I'm not ready to take that step, but I hear you.
I do. I think he's mentally ill, but I think it's a type of mental illness that is a result of your nurture. I think the conditions under which he's lived have led him to this place in his life where he absolutely, positively doesn't think he can be wrong.
I agree with that statement. That's how he appears.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to apologize for anything. This is not the behavior of a well-adjusted, mentally stable, more emotionally, mentally and emotionally, but stable person.
Well, so I don't know if I would. The average person, no, but I don't think he's the average person. And what I mean by that is the average person also doesn't own umpteen millions of dollars from successful business deals and can brush off. So,
well, the average person didn't inherit $250 million in the 70s.
Yeah.
That's a $250 million in the 70s is a lot of fucking money.
Yep.
I don't think people appreciate that the average household income in the 70s, you were strong middle class. If you were making $50,000 a year, you were in a pretty good situation as far as a family goes. You could have a home. You could have your wife staying at home. You could have 2 cars. Your kids would want for nothing. You would live a pretty goddamn comfortable life in the 1970s at $50,000 a year for a salary or an income. Yeah. And now you say you inherit $250 million in the 1970s? Yeah. You are a stupid level of wealthy.
Yeah, okay.
So I agree with you. He's not average, but he was born into not average.
Sure.
It's like saying Paris Hilton's not average. No fucking shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I agree. Yeah. I don't even remember where we were with the conversation at this point.
With the control, with money interests and stuff like that.
So,
and the control within the politics. Do you think like a McCain, like McCain's move? What was it? McCain wasn't McCain. What was it? No, Dodd-Frank. No, it was McCain-Feingold. Do you think McCain-Feingold's attempt to affect or to curb campaign finance reform prior to Citizens United, do you think that would have been helpful, or do you think that's literally just trying to stick your finger in a dam that's about to go?
Well, it's complex. They're complex questions and not easy to answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it matters.
Oh, okay. Is that because of special interest?
Well, I don't know if...
Because of lobbyists, I guess?
Chicken or the egg.
Sure.
But my point is, so the problem is we don't get to where we are now without having gone through what we went through. But again, my point is that the average person... So I know a lot of very intelligent and smart people. I also know a lot of people who are not intelligent or smart, or intelligent and smart,
or very well educated.
Yeah. And that's okay.
The spectrum.
Yeah. And my point is that the level of apathy, I don't know if the level of apathy is created because of what has happened, or if the level of apathy always, we've been on this course and now people are taking advantage of it. But my point is, I'm not sure that there was one particular incident that would have changed the course of, certainly there are, you go back in time, you step on a butterfly in the world.
Of course. But, you can look at the butterfly effect, sure.
But
I agree that history in our timeline is way more fluid. I agree with you.
Technology to create. So I think if these events that you're talking about, your question essentially was, if we enacted these prohibitions or if we took remedial measures in the 80s or the 90s, would we be where we are today with Clinton and Trump? And my response is, I kind of think we still would be. And the reason I think that is because as technology moves forward, I think people become more self-interested, and they're more interested in looking up they're more interested in reading about reality, the sports or sex or whatever, and they're not just the apathy of government in general. People learn about government and people like learning about government, but people aren't active.
Oh, 100% agree. And that's a great statement. That's probably going to lead us to where I'm trying to go. That's good. Yeah.
So, would one set of regulations have prevented campaign finance, reform the way that it occurred? I don't know. I think there are enough people with enough wealth and enough self-interest who would have worked to continue. This stuff has been rise of the big banks in the 70s. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. The repeal of Glass-Steagall was 20 plus years in the making.
Yeah.
And it was maneuvering to get there. And one could argue it was in the making since it was enacted.
Right.
But there was a lot there was a World War that happened. There was a Cold War happened. There was a lot of shit that went on that kind of prevented that from taking front. But also was kind of beneficial because it kind of allowed for the insidious and incestuous relationships to occur unchecked and unrecognized because it's kind of the wag the dog thing. And there's definitely validity to that. But I think there's the idea because you're right. There's so much going on at any time that people are not connected to. And I think I should probably caveat that my question wasn't necessarily would it prevented it, but did those things, they definitely and arguably assisted it. They helped go in that direction. So they were, I think, part of the series of unfortunate events that led to it.
Sure.
But it's interesting. I never considered the way you framed it, and that is pretty interesting. And I don't necessarily disagree with you that had they not been enacted, or had Glass-Steagall not been repealed, had it still been in place, had Citizens United not happened, I think you're probably right. I still think there's a good chance we would have come to this anyways. And I do agree, and this has always been my fundamental argument, especially when I hear people talking about how the U.S. That government's broken. Government's not broken. Government's not broken at all. The problem is it's an operator error. It's not a system error. It is.
Yeah.
And you're right. And what's happening is now, and I hadn't thought of this till we were just talking about it. Now technology has kind of become this interface, and there's a problem in that interface. So now we had a pre-existing operator error, and now there's a software error that doesn't even allow the hardware to work properly.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, voter turnout has fucking sucked for a long time.
Yeah.
And it sucks. More importantly, the deeper down you go, it sucks at a fucking local level.
Yeah.
It sucks at a fucking state level. It's abysmal unless it's a goddamn presidential election at the national level.
Yep. Yeah.
So what I've been telling my friends who are, on Facebook, you got everybody talking the rise of Gary Johnson and all this stuff. And I'm like, number one, a third party's not going to help shit. It's just going to mean the few people that turn out are going to have three choices and less is going to get done. Plus, if you put a third party candidate in and the two parties still control Congress, you still have nothing getting done.
Yeah.
And no one's going to, and if the past, we'll just even use the past 8 years. If the past 8 years are any indication, 2008, everybody showed up. Everybody was out in the polls. Hope and change. Hope and change. They were all there for Barack Obama. They left him in the fucking lurch in 2010 midterm elections. They didn't show the fuck up.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney kind of shot himself in the foot in 2012. Could have been a little more competitive, but he wouldn't have beaten Barack Obama because they still turned out. Fantastic election campaign. But in the 2014 midterms, that was actually the Republican Party, and within it, that divide of Tea Party and old school GOP. The old school GOP regained some ground. But the Democrats didn't. They didn't take advantage because they didn't show up to the fucking polls. And you kind of see this, you'll see this in American history where voter turnout fucking sucks.
Yep.
So I tell people, until you have, I'll even be very, very fair. If you can have 55% voter turnout
Wow. Yep.
for 2 election cycles, and when I mean 2 election cycles, I'm talking full cycles, which goes off the Senate. So it's got to be 12 years. 2 full election cycles, because most people don't even know that senators serve for 6 years. And when you're like every 4, no, it's every 6 years. You could completely overturn government, with the exception of Supreme Court justices.
Yep.
Everything else,
Yeah.
and within the federal judge system and stuff like that, but everything else from
Yeah.
a state to a national level could be completely replaced every 6 years if you, the voter, weren't happy. And if 55% voter turnout showed up for 12 years straight,
Yeah.
we wouldn't even be worried about money and special interests and lobbyists in government.
Yeah.
Because that kind of voter turnout would scare the living shit out of the people that went down there to Washington.
I could not agree more. Yeah, I absolutely. That gets back to the heart of the issue that I was talking about, is apathy.
Yeah.
You know, the lack of interest, or, you know, and that's where I think social media is damning, because it makes me, I don't know, I range from irritated to way beyond irritated with people who, you know, they change their Facebook picture to a flag, or they do this or they do that to show their support. But you're not doing anything. You're just showing other people that you feel a certain way, and that makes you feel better, but it's not about you. You know, if you wanted to actually do something, then changing your whatever image to something, or posting a statement on media about you feel a certain way. But, you know, those are the people, I'd be willing to bet the majority of those people aren't voting on anything.
Yeah.
They're just, you know, couldn't tell you much about anything that's going on. In terms of that, I mean, could tell you who got voted off the Real World or whatever.
Yeah.
Thing
Oh, yeah.
I'm out of touch with. But that's where I get back to technology being an issue, because now everything is about the self, and that's where I do. You know, I don't know, how do you, whether it's just an effect, or whether it's an insidious, invisible hand. The society being so focused on the individual lends itself perfectly to that sort of a system where people don't care. They just don't care. They're more interested about the news flash that's going to come up, about the bomb that went off or whatever. I mean, they'll read about it, but, you know.
Oh, and it makes people paranoid.
Yeah. Well, I'm paranoid too, to be fair. I know, you know, having now, like, I know that the likelihood of this stuff, you know, happening is compared to other things that, like, I'm far more likely to die driving home tonight than I am in a mass shooting or a bombing or a terrorist attack. But the media, you know, hypersensitivity to those things, yeah, it is. You know, I don't fault people for getting caught up in that stuff, but what I do fault them for is don't get caught up, but then not do anything about it.
So,
you know,
well, I'll give you something that even seems a little more innocuous. Then forget about mass shootings and in these things, right?
Yeah.
And forget about suicide bombings and large-scale terrorist attacks, not just lone wolves.
Yep.
What do you see when you see a kid riding a bike with no helmet?
Well, what do I see? I'm conflicted on that.
But your initial reaction, because of conditioning, you see a kid, if you saw a 10-year-old kid riding a bike with no helmet,
well, my initial reaction
right before the sun went down, when streetlights were on, and he was all by himself, you'd be like, what the? Where the fuck are his parents?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate to live in a very quiet street where I'm not too concerned about that sort of a thing, because there's a very strong sense of community where I live, and that, you know, everybody knows all the neighbors, and it's a little bit of, you know, wool or rosy glasses, but I think I'm a parent who doesn't. So I'm a parent. For those of you who don't know, and I don't want to be. I want my kid to scrape his knee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want my kid to ride a bike without a helmet. I don't want him to die in a freak accident, but I know that the reality of dying in a freak accident is so low that they should experience some pain in order to be well-rounded. But that whole helicopter parenting again, because it's not about raising the child, it's about being the best parent.
Yeah.
It's about self. Again, it's about posting on whatever book that I'm a better parent than you are.
Yeah.
And I think it screws kids up. But again, it's
like wishing your kid a happy birthday on Facebook when he's 3.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, and
I mean,
now I
that's
say
just
that, and someone's going to
ridiculous.
look me up and find out that I wished my kid a happy birthday when I was 3 on whatever. But
But I look at that and I'm like, wait, this is so weird.
yeah.
I'm
I agree.
But no, I'm with you. Like I know that it's weird.
Yeah.
Yet I still capture myself sometimes doing things like that, weirder things. But I don't post that much on Facebook, really. And when I do, it's more like an angry rant, and then people are like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
And I know. So I don't think it's bad. It's not inherently bad. It's not inherently bad to share moments that you find pleasure in with other people. It's not a bad thing to say, look, my kid can ride a bike, or my kid went down a water slide, or whatever. But the problem is, if your head is in the sand on other issues, because you're so focused on, whatever the party favor that you handed out for your kid's birthday party, this 4th birthday party, that's a problem. To me, that's a problem. Especially when, it's the same sort of thing where there are serious issues going on that people are not paying attention to because it's easier to comment about, oh, you got a new puppy, that's really cute. Like, that's what drives me insane. And you don't have to be one extreme or the other. I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. You can take a little time for whatever. But you're just pummeled by media and society. And I love BuzzFeed as much as the next person, but there goes an hour of your life. You know what I mean? And it's like, when I was in college, I fucking hated those people who had the "kill your TV" bumper stickers. Yeah. And now I want one. I love my public library. I want to kill my TV because it's amazing. I feel like it's like waking up the Matrix. Yeah. You just don't even realize how much media tells you how to live, how to act, how to feel. And again, then we're getting all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where it's those special interest groups that it's the Rupert Murdochs who are funding Comcast, NBC, who are paying Hillary or Donald to do certain things, and then I respond because I want a Mickey Mouse doll.
Sure, but here's the interesting thing. So this kind of goes back again to what I was talking about: competing interests. So you have your internet providers who are trying to further refine and monopolize their market, but you have internet powerhouses who are more reliant upon more freedom with the internet and more access, i.e. Google and Facebook, who are the counter to that. And as a matter of fact, Google is actually is trying to, have you heard of Project Loon?
No.
So Google has this idea of providing internet to the entire globe using weather balloon-like balloons that go up and send down will send down internet. But it'll work with whoever the provider is in that airspace, or the ground that's below that airspace. So if it's one of the ones flying over Europe, you'll jump on whatever Europe's big telecom provider is. So it's working with the telecom companies, and all you need is a smartphone. Yeah. And the idea is you have a smartphone. It can read their towers. It can talk to their towers because it can. Yeah. And you have access to the internet. Wow. It's that easy. Yeah. And this is global. And the idea is, it gets kind of freakier there. This is where I can go off on conspiracy theory, but I do it more for fun, and I like to connect dots. But Facebook is also exploring this, but Facebook's exploring it, doing it with drones.
Wow. Well, who controls the drones?
Well, Facebook
Not
would.
that doesn't matter. That's irrelevant.
Facebook would. But, I mean, there are military-grade drones which can loiter at 60 or 70,000 feet, and they can sit up there for days upon days on end. And you just literally plug in, and they just sit there and go around. And if now, when you have cameras and stuff on them, you have to constantly monitor. But if all you're doing is sending down a large cone signal, it doesn't take much to cover huge swaths of Earth in almost a direct line of sight, because 60,000 feet up has huge coverage and almost no loss of coverage. Like, you're almost always in what we call in the military loss or line of sight of that thing at where it's at. So there's some really interesting things going on to circumvent these attempts to further control access to the internet, because those who are powerhouses on the internet, their interest is to get more people online. So you have these kind of competing interests that will never see eye to eye, because in some cases, looking at your old media, your Rupert Murdoch types, the future, if they're not being very proactive, doesn't look so good. Because the model of commercials and all that stuff, and your regular, like we were talking about Netflix. Netflix is out ahead of everybody. I don't have any idea. I cannot for the life of me figure out how Netflix, based upon their rather cheap subscription, is making the movies and shows that they are. And they're not doing advertising.
Well, they're already running into some issues with that. You know, from what I understand, we're big House of Cards fans. And I know that they were having issues signing up all the actors because their demands were getting too high, and then didn't have the funds to cover.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think it's as limitless as it sounds, but I
didn't know about that.
They like I think Kevin Spacey or the wife, or
Robin Wright. She's phenomenal. To think what a life she grew up on a farm. She became a princess at a young age. Married Wesley. Obviously, that didn't work out, because then she ended up with Kevin Spacey's character. I mean, what a fantastic life for Buttercup.
I know. So I know they had some issues, but Netflix is doing it right by collecting. I want to say lesser known, but that's not accurate. But some of them are lesser known.
Absolutely.
And just spinning off on whatever's popular, or grabbing remakes or this, that, or the next thing. My train of thought died. I think I need more.
Have beer. More. Have more. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know. I think it comes into, I don't know, there's some interesting thoughts and ideas and growths or concepts to kind of level the playing field that's always kind of existed and plagued man, especially in social contracts, between the haves and the have-nots.
I don't have a problem with inequity. I don't have a problem with inequity at all. I have a problem with... I do have a problem with...
What about egregious inequity?
Well, and I was going to say monopolies.
Okay.
Or...
so you don't have a problem with inequity, but you do want within context of a level playing field.
Essentially, yeah. But I don't know how you do that.
I don't either, but I think it's important for... me personally, I think that is one of our kind of... that is in our founding documents. At least the philosophy of it, the idea that, listen, we're going to continually work to level the playing field as a starting point. As far as the basic access. So,
sure, I agree.
Public education should be good. And now here's where I'll go. Here's where I'm going to kind of... I don't think everybody should go to college.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it should be competitive. I don't think it should be a guarantee you get into college. I think that there is a market for it. But I am pretty disgusted with the state of higher education because it has become a very profitable business. And I think to the detriment of what's coming out the other side.
Oh yeah.
So now,
Yeah, I agree.
instead of being focused as the next level after high school, in liberal arts being the big swath of what you do, which teaches you critical thinking, research skills, all these things, the things that the Ivy League schools are founded upon, which are the liberal arts and critical thinking, you do that, you go out into the world. You come back from the world with some experience, and then you go on to your master's degree. Instead, I'm going to keep you in school for anywhere from 6 to 10 years. So when you're 24 years old, you can walk out into the world with a master's degree, but not a fucking clue as to whether or not you have any interest in mastering the shit you studied.
Yeah. It's true. The problem is, though, society has evolved in that there clearly is a need for trades, but we're not a trade society anymore. So the majority of you're always going to need people to dig ditches or pick up trash, to be police officers, to be firefighters. But most jobs, I think, we're a capitalist society, and where you make money, it's becoming specialized in a niche field that other people can't perform the services that you can perform. So the only way to get money is to go through higher education, or at least that's the belief anyways. It's not always that, you go back to, what was it, was that movie, not The Hangover, the first one with Will Smith, no, not Will Smith, Will Ferrell, whatever, the guy becomes they're old school. Okay, the guy becomes really wealthy, becomes like a stereo installation.
Vince Vaughn.
Yes.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn's character. Yep.
Yeah, so there is that, but I think that in terms of what's the likelihood of that happening versus you getting a $60,000, $50,000 a year job as a clerical employee doing something, I think it's a lot higher with a bachelor's degree. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it that there's a need for trades skills, but I also think that the safer bet, so I'm a parent.
Yep.
And if my kids tell me I want to go to trade school versus college, I'm going to have a long conversation with them because, I'm not going to tell them no per se. No, just to say, it's not you're going to college and that's it. But I need you to be really well aware of, the lack of a college education will limit your earnings potentials. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go back later on like you're suggesting.
Yep.
But
like I did.
Yeah. But again, the likelihood of earning earlier, I think, is greater with a degree. But the problem is the unintended consequence, or maybe the intended consequence, is that people graduate from undergraduate with $40,000 worth of loans, and they can't find a job making more than $28,000 a year.
Yep.
And that happens, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it happens.
A lot. But, you roll the dice.
Yep.
Because I guess it's an interesting concept about what is more likely going to happen. Are you really more likely to graduate and get a job making at least 50, which I think is, for a single earner, probably a good, for a single earner right now, unmarried, no family, probably a good salary, versus walking out making $28,000, which is, below livable wage, I think what they say. Are you more likely to walk out getting a $50,000 a year job, or you're more likely to walk out making $28,000 a year?
Yeah.
Under a livable wage. I walked out of undergrad making, barely a livable wage.
Yeah.
So I got more education, and now I do better than that. But
Yep.
I still got a lot of student loans to pay for it.
Yep.
So.
And there was sacrifice you made.
Yeah.
There was absolutely sacrifice you made, and you were lucky. Not lucky.
Yeah.
I think luck is about. Well, I mean, the caliber of your wife, but in both our cases, we're both lucky.
Yeah.
We both married well out of our league.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least that's what we tell them. When we don't let them know that they're actually we're actually out of their leagues. But it's something to be said that, you and Lauren, and I don't know this because I'm not necessarily, I'm not intimately aware, but my suspicion is, being a married man who has a wife, that you guys had a conversation. You made the decision to make the sacrifices for you to go through law school.
Yeah.
And to make a better living on the other side of it. And I'm sure there were trials and tribulations during the time you were in law school because there are sacrifices. But you saw it through. So, I mean, they're
Well, that's what I think is a great thing about our country and our society's ability to do that. You can do that.
If you're willing to risk, take the risk.
Right.
And endure.
But you have to be willing to lose. You have to be willing to go through, and I went to a law school that has a quality reputation around New England, but, doesn't carry the same weight nationally. And I went to law school with people who are smarter than me that don't have jobs that I've had, or not earning like I'm earning. Mm-hmm. And there's people who are doing better than me, so it's still a risk. So even getting an advanced degree is still a risk,
of course.
But you roll the dice, which again I think makes this country great because there are a lot of places that you don't have that. You can't do that.
A lot of the world is like that.
Yeah, you're born into a caste system or born into a place where, maybe not a formal caste system, but essentially a caste system where...
Look, try being born into a tribal society.
Yeah.
There's still a whole lot of tribalism going around. There's plenty of it going around, even within our own culture. It's more complicated and more layered, but it's still tribalism.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to be one of the hardest things for us in the sense of like a larger global economy, global market, becoming a global community. That's going to be something that's going to take a long fucking time to shed. It's ingrained in us, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking. So we'll say on the good side, we've been fucking around with this social contract theory. We'll say 5,000 years. We'll go back. We'll say Babylon's the first, and it's not, but we'll just use that as a marker. Okay. So if we go back 5,000 years, we're talking about tribalism, rooted old school tribalism for 195,000 years or thereabouts. It kind of becomes ingrained in you.
Sure.
And we're fighting against that. And we're fighting against that, and this is to the technology point in an age that we never could have seen coming. Things are changing now. We have officially started to create shit that outpaces, as tool makers, we have made tools that now are allowing us to make tools at a rate that far exceeds what our evolutionary capacity is.
Yes.
And that's something in and of itself. I believe that anyways.
Yeah. I want to start disagreeing with you on things. I feel like this is pretty bland because I keep agreeing with whatever you're saying. But to that, it goes back to your original suggestion where I disagree with you that... See, I have a disagreement. Where I disagree with you that too much is being pushed towards higher education. Because I do believe that, the studies are out there, and you can find studies for everything. But the studies are out there, and the statements are out there, and there are a large section of people who believe that higher ed is just a for-profit grouping, but...
Well, I don't think that. I'm just saying I don't think that. That's,
sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
But you get folks, like you said, so we have advanced tools.
Yeah.
That you need to have degrees in order to operate.
Absolutely.
Which is a wonderful thing. Our society can progress because people in general are smarter. And that's a good thing that we... again, that's where I get back to free market and let capitalism rule and push people and let the GEs of the world create new things. But when the GEs of the world are taking away, and I've tried to work for GE in the past, and I say that because I've submitted a couple applications, whatever, not a big deal. But I've had family members that work for GE, so I'm going to say the company that shall remain nameless, the Voldemort, they...
When you say G, you mean General Electric, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That G. All right, just to be sure. Because they're going to remain Nameless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
G.
Guy.
When they're able to funnel money into politics to direct the way that we live, that's where I have a problem.
Okay.
Because when they're pushing their own agenda, we're moving away from that level playing field.
Yes.
And so that's where I have an issue with it. The advances, I think, in I love using my GPS and text messaging and all that stuff, but if you are not careful and you become disconnected with the things that are going on around you, you fall asleep.
Yeah.
And when you are apathetic, that's when bad things happen. And
Sure.
that's why I think I think the state of apathy has reached a point where people are just disconnected.
Yeah.
And that's, getting back to making that larger connection that you were talking about, where you can have people who are educated and intelligent but don't know, really smart people who could build a nuclear bomb who don't understand why it's important to vote.
Fuck yeah. Well, I think we have a misperception, and it's kind of something that is reinforced for whatever reason. People make the mistake of thinking because someone is educated, they're smart.
Yeah.
They have a
I agree with
degree.
that.
Like, people think they have a degree, therefore, they're smart, they have a degree. And it's like, no. Or so-and-so doesn't have a degree,
Yeah.
and they're not all that smart. Listen, people run the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
You can go and meet, like, on boards. You can do internet or physically, and meet a bunch of people in Mensa.
Mm-hmm.
And they're testably, they're brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Socially, they're fucktarded. They are like
That's a technical term?
4-year-olds.
Yeah.
They are petty. They are small-minded. They are singular. They lack social skills. And the higher you go up in the testable IQ, the less socially
Yeah.
able you are. So and the other thing is, what you can't test is a guy who has this great mechanical mind and fell in love with cars at a young age and just started tinkering. And now all of a sudden, he can disassemble any motor and put it all back together blindfolded. No one ever taught him. There's brilliance in that. And he understands, looking at it, every mechanical action, how it works, and reaction, and how it goes from combustion to producing power at the wheels. He understands all these higher level things of physics, and he's without doing it, untrained, he's doing calculus competition. He's doing all this shit in his head, and you'll never recognize it. And people discount that. And I think that that's kind of fucking tragic.
We have a disagreement. I do. I disagree with you. I agree with you in the. I agree with you in the magic of it, that somebody who has never had any formal training could understand how to do that. The problem I have with it is a really strictly economical problem.
Yep.
In that's wonderful that somebody could do that, but what's the value?
How does it contribute?
Yeah.
What's
the value
what's
to
their
society
contribution?
that person brings forward?
Sure.
And so
Maybe they don't have access to the market to illustrate that.
Well, and so you had asked me originally where I am with it, and I try to be a strictly free market person.
Yeah.
But I do have, I'm really conflicted with the notion of free market, where I think those people in Indiana who were, or maybe it was Illinois, whatever, the people who were prohibited from, not prohibited, there was a law that they were allowed to not sell a gay couple cake.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
And I'm okay with that, and I'm also really not okay with that at the same time. I mean, I think that people should be, again, voting with their feet.
Yep.
What I mean by that is, if you disagree that these people shouldn't be able to sell or not sell cakes, whatever, then don't go to the store. Mm-hmm. But I do have a problem when there's a section of society that So let's say every cake maker in Indiana said, I don't want to sell cakes to gay people anymore. Then we have a small section of society of gay people in Indiana, and I'm just using this as a conversation topic, that now
don't take
can't buy
offense
cake.
if you're gay in Indiana.
Yeah. And you can't buy cake. Because that's not how America works. We're supposed to be protecting those people who need protection.
Yeah.
The minorities.
The disenfranchised.
Right. So I have a real difficult time myself just putting those two ideas together.
Yeah.
I really, I don't know, maybe that's a bizarre thing to be worried about, but I just can't get my brain around that. So getting back to your whole idea of, yeah, it's a wonderful thing that I couldn't do that. I would have no idea. If the engine broke, I would have no idea, and I would be really impressed of somebody who could do it. But that, I find more value in somebody who can update a piece of technology like an iPhone than maybe somebody who can do that particular thing. So, and I'm personally okay with that notion because, again, it's about value to society, and society changes. And so I think we get into a socialist concept of, well, we should be treating everybody the same. I don't think we should treat everybody the same. We shouldn't be.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that you can be influenced by socialist philosophies, and not be practicing socialism. They can influence you and guide you in a sense of how to try to move forward, and how to better treat your fellow man, and how to be quote unquote progressive.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, but it requires balance, because even capitalism, in its original script, John Smith, was that his name? I can't remember off the top of my head. It was Smith. I think it is John Smith. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. But even in his initial inceptions, his first writings about the ideas and the underpinnings and the philosophy of capitalism was that it did require government regulation, because free market capitalism, in the sense that people love to throw that term around, right? People like to say, oh, I'm a free market capitalist, until shit's not in your favor, until your fucking competitor came out with a better fucking widget.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, instead of being honorable in conceding the fucking field of battle and dying off, you fucking fight and try to get the government to lead shit in your favor. The perfect example is the bailout of the banks.
Yeah.
These are the people who champion free market capitalism. They yell it from the top that they love Gordon Gekko.
Yeah.
They love him.
Yeah.
But when time came to fucking pay up on their debts, they fucking cowered. They pissed themselves and they cried like little bitches.
Yep.
And it was the American taxpayer who fucking bailed them out. And still, not even 10 years later, we've got a billionaire who comes from that class, that caste, if you will. And people are fucking showing up to his rallies and like, hell yeah, blue collar workers thinking this motherfucker has any sense of who or what they are.
Yeah.
Yet they want to throw stones at the black kid because he disrespects a cop, but they don't understand that the fucking shit show that kid grew up with and the conditions in which brought him to there. Doesn't make the kid right, but you at least need to understand the conditions that got him there.
Yeah, you should watch that movie. Why We're Not Broke. I think you'd like it.
I probably would. Yeah.
It's the same. Yeah, it covers a lot of those. Covers a lot of those topics. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you get to talk about this shit much at work?
So no, not really. I mean, we have conversations about it, and but. Well, it's interesting because we have a variety of people in my work, and some well-educated, again, others who have less responsibilities in their jobs.
That means less educated.
I didn't say that. But they give, everybody's passionate, and it's just. I find some of my most stimulating conversations can be with with the custodians.
Oh yeah.
Because just everybody's circumstances are different, but one of the things that I just am very jaded again with our current state of politics. That was your original question about why we're even here. Our current state of politics. It's just gone so. I don't know how we got. I don't know how we got to where I've never really stopped and thought about it. To the degree that you have. I mean, certainly.
I've thought about this shit a lot.
Yeah. Well, so I do. One of the things that I talk about in one of the courses that I had taught previously. Is about the influence of politics on judges and the influence of money on law. There's another great movie called Hot Coffee. If you've never seen it, you should. I would highly recommend it. It's one. A lot of these legal reforms movies are very good, but it talks about a lot of judges. So in Massachusetts, our judges are appointed for life, and most judges in New England are appointed for a life term or at least appointed regularly, but there are some judges who are elected. Mm-hmm. And
is Virginia like that?
I believe Virginia is
because
judges.
The reason I asked that is because it was Virginia and Massachusetts, which were two of the most influential in the structuring of our federal government at the time. Based upon their constitutions and what they had kind of evolved to. And, so when you make that point, it's like, well, yeah, you see it mirrored in the Supreme Court. In matter of fact, in Massachusetts, they call it the Superior Court, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question arises, again, should we... I'm not phrasing the question correctly. Should we work for our judges or should our judges work for us? And what I mean by that is, should judges be the ones who tell us how society works, or do we tell judges how society works? Which is a really interesting concept when you think about it. I've always been of the mindset, and I think most people, at least that grew up in where I grew up, believe that law is a thing to be followed, and they don't understand that law is a thing that can be changed.
Yes,
and which again, the way that you do it is by having impacts in politics, and that's what's truly scary about all this stuff. Or at least, from my background, being a lawyer and talking about this is stuff that I get to talk about occasionally. Is so law sets everything the way that we live our lives, whether I'm allowed to drink these 2 other beers and drive home, or if that's against the law, or, do I want to take drugs, steroids, get really strong, law determines all those things, but we can have a say on what law is, which is a wonderful thing. We can determine how, what laws are going to drive our society. I think that's great.
Yeah, we can influence those who will drive that.
Yeah. That is great. The problem is that when the people who determine the laws are getting paid for by one corporation, like NBC or whatever the corporation may be, the Voldemorts, when Voldemort determines who they're going to fund, then they can put the judges in the right spots to rule on certain cases. They can fund the legislators to, and I think we're dumbing it down now to stuff you already talk about. But I think that's I have a real problem with it because I think it's a good model.
I agree with you. Yeah,
it's just not operating right now.
But you're absolutely right. But it requires the maintenance piece of it. In order for the model to work, requires the engagement of the citizenry.
Right.
The body politic has to be engaged. They have to be involved.
Yeah.
And that's a failing. So the system doesn't fail. Those who use it are failed. But again, you're right. And in this kind of, I'm going to kind of talk to your point of the guiding hand.
Because it exists.
Kind of feeding the conspiracy thing. Well, no, but I mean, seriously. So you see a crumbling of education. You see all these things, and you do see a dumbing down of the American people. And I don't know if it's intentional because when you read these, man, when you get into, or at least try to get into the frame of mind and understand those who got into positions of power. So when you look at No Child Left Behind and you look at the influences on it, the drivers behind it, these people were not trying to be malicious. They truly believed this would work.
Yeah.
In their mindset, this was something that would work. You know, well, I do, but I also think these are people who have a shitty understanding of the scientific method, and they had, and if they applied it properly, they would have said, "Hey, listen, this is my theory. We're going to conduct an experiment, and if the results that I predict to come out from my theory don't come out, then we're going to scrap it."
Yeah. And
the reality is, the theory of No Child Left Behind is fantastic, but in this experiment that we've run, to include the extensions of it and the growth of it, the results suck. So your theories were fucking wrong, but not completely. It's not to say everything was wrong, but you have to disentangle it and you have to dissect it and find out what worked and what didn't, and be honest about that. You have to have someone who's an honest arbiter of it to then help you guide in its evolution. And that's where we kind of fail. And there's signs of our failure that go back to FDR. Like I look at FDR and I look at the New Deal, and I see that as being a huge leap in evolution of American society. But what happened, unfortunately, is FDR expanded federal government, but he was a brilliant fucking dude who understood a whole bunch of shit. Yep. And everything he was doing, a lot of that shit was in his fucking head.
Yep.
And when he fucking died, no one else knew how the fuck to do all that.
Yeah.
So now you have systems that were put in place, like Social Security, all these different social programs he put in place. The idea was those who elect and those who are elected would stay engaged. And they would continue to evolve these things and have them grow with society. And if you don't have that piece, then archaic laws and practices stay in place, and only those who really study them figure out how to manipulate them.
Yep.
And that's how you borrow from Social Security for 40 fucking years and never pay it back and bring us to a place where it's almost drained, which it's not. Again, going down, we're not really broke thing.
Yeah.
But you find ways of creative accounting, thinking, I'm just going to keep kicking this down the road.
Sure.
Hey, holy shit, the baby boomers are about to start retiring. Oh,
yeah,
that's a problem.
Yeah.
So let me show you guys what's behind this curtain.
Yeah.
Which you guys just thought it was decoration and drapes, but actually there's a big room back there.
Yeah.
And it's a whole lot of shit. So I'm going to open it up and we're going to try and discuss it. Yeah. I think that failing is so, it's lost. It's lost on people and they don't understand it. And I think that is at the root of it. That trajectory that leads us to Trump and Clinton goes way back.
Yes.
And I agree with you, but I do think that there's probably points along that fluid history leads into the present, and the present and the future are all in the same kind of thing. There are points you can look at and say, yeah, but right here, this was pretty fucking instrumental. And as far as the state of the Republican Party, for me, a huge point is Newt Gingrich and the contract with America. When the Republican Party decided to make a public proclamation that they are the moralistic society, like very clearly, in this whole idea, in this whole thing, and that heavily influenced the direction, the tone, and the type of people who were drawn to the Republican Party. Very shortly after, you see the rise of Fox News. You see the rise of the Republican noise machine, and they start going down this path. And you have Karl Rove come along, and he's like, hey, listen, there's an evangelical base out there that's huge. Reagan kind of tapped into it with Billy Graham, but I'm telling you, it's bigger than that, and we can ride that wave. Yeah. And that wave rides in, and they become empowered. And then it kind of dwindles off. You see it drop off. That support, that Tea Party neocon influence starts to drop off in the second term of George Bush. But the rebound to that is the Tea Party. Yeah. And a lot of the people that are in the Tea Party were part of that rise. So it's this sliding to the right in a social, moral sense with the contract with America, which sets you down. That's that little nudge that sends you further down and leaves there. I think you could probably find the underpinnings of what led to Hillary Clinton probably somewhere around that time, but it probably goes back a little bit further to where we get to. But I look at that as being a pretty big event in recent history. And although, was that 24, 25 years ago? I mean, it's still recent history.
Yeah.
It's not ancient history, although there are plenty of kids running around today. Matter of fact, how about this for a scary notion? In about 2 years, well, 3 years, in 3 years, this time 3 years from now, will be probably the first class of graduates of high school graduation who were born post 9/11.
Wow.
Or about 4 years from now.
Wow. Yeah.
Because 4 years from now puts it at 19. It puts it at 18 years old after, coincidentally, September of 2011. So they wouldn't have started. They would have been born. If you were born after that, you would have started school.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
So are you? It sounds like you're suggesting that the rise of the Republican Party's proclamation that they're the moralistic group.
It was a marketing campaign, just to be clear. Newt Gingrich was no angel. He was doing the same kind of shit that Bill Clinton did. He just he got run out for it. Yeah.
It sounded like you were saying that's the beginning that led us to Hillary and Donald.
Well, I'm saying Donald specifically. I was really kind of talking to the Republican Party.
Okay, because but I don't have a problem. I don't agree with, but I don't have a problem with people expressing that they're Tea Party Republicans.
I don't either.
So again, it gets back to I'm okay with that. So what's the issue is neither one of these candidates speaks to me as a person. Mm-hmm. And that's a major problem, obviously, because if we're going to be electing people into positions that are going to determine, they're going to advocate for laws or advocate for the way we run our society, that they don't actually reflect a portion of society, that's a major issue. But so what's the alternative? We'll have somebody run against them or run something, but it's not happening.
Okay, so entertain me here for a second.
Okay.
In a pragmatic sense, because everything that you spoke about Hillary, and we can do this with Donald Trump also, but I think we'll get there by doing just one side of it, because you specifically kind of like listed the reasons you don't like Hillary Clinton. Those are mostly emotional.
Yep.
It's a gut issue, right?
Yeah.
So now, based upon the substance of her platform,
yes,
strictly black and white stuff, in looking at both of them, although it's kind of hard, and I'm not throwing shots here, I'm being honest, it's kind of hard to find substance in Donald Trump when it comes to looking for policy. People say it's there, but when you read it, it's actually a lot of rhetoric. It's a lot of words. It looks good to the uninformed. Yeah. But you can tell that whoever wrote it almost in like a Himmler kind of way, and that's a reference to the Nazis for those who don't know it.
Yeah.
But it's not done in the same tone of when you do read this stuff that Hillary Clinton has out there, or when you hear her speak. There's a certain depth to it, a depth of understanding in a legal mind sense, which you can appreciate for.
Yes.
So, of the two candidates, because you'll never find someone who you fully line up with, it's just never gonna fucking happen. You and I have known each other for fucking 15 years now. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of talks. We've had drunken talks. We've had sober talks. We've had all kinds of talks and conversations, casual conversations. I mean, we've always had good conversations, and we don't line up. But of the two put before you, which one lines up, is more aligned with you in a political and social interest and direction way? Because I think that's really how, and I'm not disagreeing with this people's claimed sense of disenfranchisement. I get that. That's an emotional thing. But I'm talking strictly like rational approach to it. If you were to plus column and minus column, like pro, con, each one of them, line them up, you'd be like, all right, I line here, did a mathematical equation, which one would you be more aligned with, do you think? And obviously you don't know necessarily, but what's your gut on that?
So the answer of your question is probably Hillary.
Okay.
The problem is that I think we have a lot of people that live in America, and for all of the free market shtick that we had run through previously, I think that not that we owe a duty, because we don't owe a duty, but I would like to see a society that takes care of people that can't take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Which is more in line with where Hillary's going.
Yeah.
The problem is, just like everybody else, and I think any Republican fan or candidate would agree, I get just as sick as the next guy when, I'm going into the store and deciding whether I'm going to buy, $5 cheese or $6 cheese, and then the guy in front of me buys a lobster with an EBT card.
Yeah.
I got a problem with that.
Yep.
But
there's some flaws in that system. That goes back to my FDR comment.
Right. But I just believe, right or wrong, I believe that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And I don't think that because some people take advantage, and maybe it's a large number of people who take advantage, but I think if we can save people who don't, who can't help themselves, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That inherent conflict is a problem I have with Hillary, though, because she takes those problems and she takes those programs and wants to expand them even more. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no. We got to fix the problems that we have with these systems, because I don't think they're bad. So, you hear the awful stuff about welfare, and I don't have the study in front of me. I haven't certainly read it recently, but it's my understanding that the majority of people on welfare are single white mothers.
Yeah.
That's not what you hear.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's not what you read. It's not anecdotally. It's not what you see.
Absolutely.
So it's the same thing you were talking about before, where like the likelihood of getting killed in a mass shooting, but everybody's terrified of that.
Yeah.
So am I a proponent of drug testing for receiving welfare benefits? Yeah. Why not? Because I don't want to see that stuff happen. I'm okay with that. I'm okay in the theory of that. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with paying for that, and I don't want my tax dollars paying for that. What I want is, I'm okay with my tax dollars going to help somebody who can't help themselves. I'm not okay with my tax dollars going for somebody who's not helping themselves. I'm okay with my tax dollars paying for streets. I'm okay with them paying for telephone lights. I'm okay for the social things that we take advantage. Again, I love my library.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with paying for a library, which is, I think, more Hillary than it is Donald. Problem with the Republicans is individual liberties scrap everything. I'm also, they also.
Well, they don't. I get where you're coming from, but
yeah.
They're not that libertarian in their stance.
Well, and so that's exactly what I was going to say. Is that's the major issue I have with libertarians. Is you hear the alternative to Republican Democrat is libertarian.
Well, I think the irony is that you actually can't. If you're a true through and through libertarian, you can't belong to a libertarian party.
Yeah.
You can't have a libertarian party. I actually talked to. I had a conversation with someone who fancies themselves libertarian. I said, you do realize if you're a true libertarian, you can't be part of a libertarian party.
Yeah.
And it cannot exist. I was like, you do understand the irony of that, right? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, no, absolutely, you can't. If you don't acknowledge that, if you don't concede that, you don't understand libertarianism at its thing. And that's what will always hold me back from being a libertarian.
Yeah.
Because I can appreciate your sentiments and your philosophy. But the problem is, it has never, there's nothing in the course of recorded human history that speaks to the idea that we could live in that world, because that is a world of anarchy, but everybody agrees to get along.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just not going to fucking happen.
Yeah. It's
absurd.
What's it, Lake, whatever. The lake where everybody gets the same score. There's a theory about a lake where everybody's always happy and everybody always scores an 80 on an exam and nobody ever gets Utopia. It's Utopia.
Okay. Okay. Utopian thinking.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad religion songs about that sort of stuff. And that's, pretty wise guys. So I guess I line up more with traditional democratic sentiments.
But I would even go so further. So, like, that's the first layer, right? So then what I would say is, and I would concede this, I would give this to people. I would say, okay, so when we do these pro cons, now I'm going to let you go through these lists, and I'm actually going to let you weigh the issues that I'm going to allow you to give weight. And I would think that most people would still come out to it. It might be a little bit closer, but I'm willing to bet where you fall at the end of it is probably still going to come out pretty close to the same answer. Very rarely is it going to flip, is my thing.
Yep.
And I think that's where I'm at when I hear people talking about the system, or Hillary's not for me, or, well, you're just the lesser of two evils. And I'm like, no, that's not really how this works. And bringing in a third party does not help, because our system works upon compromise and finding alliances, in finding people whom you don't fully agree with, but you mostly, and especially in big ways, do align with.
So the issue that I have, is that I don't really know where Hillary is on these things. And what I do know is that she's been proven to be, they've both been proven to be inconsistent. They both have track records of flip-flopping. And I'm okay with people evolving, people change.
Good.
I'm okay with that.
I'm glad you quantified that.
But what I'm not okay with is I'm not really clear. So Hillary Clinton ran on a platform of, expanded society programs, keep what Obama's doing going forward. And the problem is, once she finally gets Bernie out of the race, she's now adopting a lot of Bernie's programs. So where the fuck are you? I don't know what. So the problem.
Simultaneously, she's also, and this is making a lot of the Bernie supporters uncomfortable, she's actually courting a lot of fucking GOP money and a lot of GOP people. And me personally, this is me. I'm a fan of Machiavellian politics. I am.
Sure.
I will always. I've said this for, I don't even know how many years now. 15 years or more. Ever since I really kind of went down the path that when I was at UMass, right around we met, the path of having this real fondness and appreciation for social contract theory in a philosophical sense, and then kind of reading the underpinning documents, which I don't think, I know there's probably contemporaries out there, but I don't think there's really been very much done since Machiavelli's The Prince. I think he was the first one to ever truly challenge Aristotle's philosopher king. And ever since then, within philosophy, they've kind of been the underpinnings that people have kind of gone off of when you talk social contract theory. Yep. So when I go back to it and watch, my luck, some philosophy nut's gonna fucking listen to this and then be like, "You're out of your mind," and fuck you, whatever. We can have that conversation. You can email me and I'll have you on and we'll have that discussion.
We'll have a deadlift contest.
Yeah, there we go. But in the context of those two, I think Aristotle's philosopher king is based upon this idea of idealism, which is fantastic and wonderful. There's good traits to have, but it fails to recognize human nature. Mm-hmm. And I think Machiavelli's philosopher king Machiavelli's Prince is a much better approach to human nature, and a real simple Barney-style breakdown of the difference between the two is that Aristotle's philosopher king is so pure in their moralistic stance that they would allow all their people to die. Mm-hmm. before they would in to get into heaven. So their character and everything would be completely and totally unblemished, and they would still be able to walk through the pearly gates to heaven.
Yeah.
And they would make that sacrifice because it was the right thing to do. Whereas the Machiavellian ruler would go to the devil and say, hey, listen, I'm cool with you having my soul, but I just need to know how to take care of these motherfuckers as best I can so they keep me in power.
Yeah.
So you'll sell your soul to the devil to keep your people happy, whatever that means,
Sure.
so that you can stay in power. And really what's interesting is that approach generally makes it's kind of that the title rise all boats because that's in your best interest.
Yeah. So,
and I appreciate I do anyways, appreciate a Machiavellian kind of politician. I think it's important to weigh that. And I'm not opposed to that. I like to see alliances because I also think it really works in our style, our system. In our system of government, representative or republic democratic, a representative democracy works really well. And our system is pretty complex. And I don't think people really appreciate the layers to it, like you've talked about it, local and stuff. But it's necessary to kind of have this kind of constant jockeying and jostling. And I like that. And the attempt to, because it brings people to the center. I'm okay with you being to one side. And you can almost, I bet you if you went back, we've definitely saw it with George Bush. We saw it with Barack Obama. We saw two people that were more representative of the leaning side of their party when they first got in. And then one of the biggest critiques of their base when they put them in initially was that they didn't hold true to it. And they became a little more centrist. And I think that that's a testament to how they actually served in the office, to tax centrists, because you're starting to see the bigger picture. Yeah. And I like that. And I think that's kind of what I, anyways, am seeing in Hillary Clinton. And I like that. I wasn't a big fan of Barack Obama when he was elected in 2008. Yeah. And as he tacked more centrist, I became more accepting of him. And I'm actually a big fan of his now. And I felt the same way about George Bush.
Yeah. Wow. So a couple of thoughts I have with this. When you're talking about Machiavelli, you're talking about the prisoner's dilemma. And the issue I have with that is I get it, but I don't know what the term is philosophically, morally, ethically. I think it is better that you and I share, I forget what, I think it was if you sell each other out, you both get 0. If you both agree, you both get 5. And if one of you agrees to sell the other one out, but you don't get sold out, you get 7. For whatever the point. The point is, so as a society, we're better if we split 5. If we both get 5,
that's
because
game
together
theory.
we've got, it's game theory. We both got 10, right?
Yep.
And so when you have, I believe that, which I think is inherently at odds with what you're talking about.
I don't think so.
Well, but here's the thing. What you're talking about is Machiavellian principles are, I'm going to do what's in my best interest, which may, in your best interest, it's better for you to have 7 than for us to have 10.
Well, to be clear, it's in the best interest. The Machiavellian thing and the prince thing, and specifically the Aristotle's Philosopher King, these are in ruling things. These are very specific to those who rule. So the idea, and it really kind of does play out, and this goes to your whole point about being selfish and being self-interested. When someone's interest is remaining in power so that they can continue to influence, they are going to be forced to evolve when you have an engaged electorate. Your engaged electorate. Now, the electorate can absolutely be the moralist. They can be of the ilk of Aristotle's Philosopher King, because they're gonna be a huge they're gonna be a huge spectrum that they're gonna come across. They will constantly ping pong that motherfucker who's trying to always please at least 51%. And that 51% can shift. And the people who go in power should be those who are always going to want to tack closer to 51%. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the president is a representative of us all. Once he's there, he's got to be by design, he's 4 years, was mostly a figurehead initially in concept, but grew in expansion of powers, and I'm fine with that. But Congress was supposed to be the one that really checked the president and was more representative, House of Reps being more representative than the Senate, and then so on and so forth, all the way up, and it plays out your party politics. But
well, so let me cut you off, and let me pose a question to you.
Sure.
So your statement is that the ruler under Machiavellian principles is going to seek to remain at 51% majority because they want to stay in power.
Close to equilibrium. Yep.
What if the majority, 70%, are feeling a certain way?
Yep.
That you're suggesting that that's a good thing for society, correct?
I didn't say it's a good thing for society, but it's a good thing for the ruler it's a good thing for the, now, and I love
you know where
this
I'm going
question.
with this.
I absolutely do. And I love that you're going with this because I'm going to go back to something you had conflict with. So go ahead, keep going.
Well, so it could be anything.
Yeah, sure. Doesn't matter.
70% of American citizens believe that people with unshaved faces, I have an unshaved face, people with unshaved faces should be slaves.
Yes.
If you have a Machiavellian leader,
Yep.
then I'm going to be a slave.
Sure. Well, no. They can try to make it that.
But, so what would be the mechanism for change?
Well, there's 70%. So now we're simply talking about what percentage. So when we talk about that leader, and we do refer to it, we make the comment of the leader, but we're only talking about how many branches of government right now.
Well, executive, I suppose.
So one branch of government.
Yeah. Well,
what's the balance to that? And I just laid this out. I did specifically say that there were checks and balances by design.
Well, the
right?
legislature is going to be the one that because they're going to determine what can and can't be done.
Sure, and there's going to be now we can get into gerrymandering and all that, but we'll talk that there's because that's a theory, right? There's a fairly equal representation. You have built into Congress, at least potentially, you have the protection of the minority. So you neither have the tyranny of the minority nor the tyranny of the majority. In a wide sweeping sense.
So here's the issue: you do that because you have a document in the Constitution that protects basic fundamental rights.
Yes, absolutely.
But
it's not set in stone, though.
Well, and you have the organism that makes sure the Constitution is upheld. Is the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
But here's the issue.
But
what you're talking about is, again, you're okay with Machiavellian principles, which is going with what the majority.
Yep.
If the Supreme Court goes with what the majority is.
Supreme Court's different.
Well, I beg to differ there.
Well, the Supreme Court is different, though.
So they are. Yes,
so
I agree
you beg to differ, but you can't. You can beg all you want, but you can't disagree. And here's what I'm saying. Let me be very clear. I don't disagree with the disagreement you're going to make.
Yep.
I know what your disagreement's going to be. We've talked enough about different things, and I agree with you. Okay. But and this is where theory versus practicality kind of crosses lines. Or it departs from the theoretical template, which we were talking about.
Yeah.
When you talk about Machiavelli, the Prince, and all that stuff versus Aristotle's Philosopher King, you're obviously talking about some theoretical stuff, but there is carryover, and I use that as a template to jump from. There are almost all the time, or at least yearly, because the Supreme Court hears a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. Justices break with quote unquote party lines fairly often. And it's really when it comes, and there's a lot of reasons for it. And when you read the decisions, now there's granted, I got it. There's some that are always going to vote their line. But even in those cases, there are instances where people are like, oh, well, and then they're going to go this way. And then they don't. And they give their reasoning for why. So there's never been a justice, at least not to my knowledge, who's ever been 100% consistent and you could predict 100% without a doubt.
Yeah. I'm okay with that statement. The issue I have with it is as justices are appointed and justices get on the bench
Yep.
by executive appointment with
Congressional approval.
yeah.
Yep.
And when you have super PACs,
Yep.
when you have those, super PACs, when you have super PACs appointing or electing or getting elected certain individuals,
Yep.
then you are stacking the Supreme Court a certain way. And
You can. It's really hard to do. Especially
Yes.
because there's a time component to it that makes it really hard to do.
I guess my point is that I think I'm losing what I was trying to argue before. So we have the Constitution,
Yep.
and the Supreme Court protects the Constitution.
Yep.
And your concern is, or your confidence is that, look, it's a document. They're gonna do what they have to do. The problem I have with that sort of a statement is there are multiple ways to look at the Constitution.
Yep.
Is it a read as written document, or is it a living Constitution? And
Well, I mean that's kind of it's funny that that's even a discussion because it is by definition a living document. It is. How many amendments are there? 27 or is it 28?
well, right.
Which one?
Oh,
I think it's 27, isn't it? Or is it 28? I can't remember. I know it's 27 or 28.
I don't remember. I want to say 28.
Okay,
What?
we'll go 28.
28th Amendment. No, that doesn't sound right.
27. I
Whatever.
believe it's 27. Either way.
It's bad that I don't know that. I should know
I know
that.
you should, but
No, that's not good.
I'm really rusty on it. But I know I'm very confident there's at least 27. I'm pretty sure it's 27 amendments. But by virtue of the fact that there's 27 amendments, it's a living document. It's not a vibrant living document in the sense that it's not easy to change. It's not constantly changing. But that was also part of the design in the structure, in the implementation of our form of government, is that it couldn't just necessarily be whimsical. Change is slow. It requires deliberation. It requires debate. It requires discussion. And it requires compromise. And it only gets to the Supreme Court after it's gone through that process by the elected and then been approved and then actually lived amongst the people until someone comes along and says, hey, wait a minute, this is fucked up. And then by the time it gets there, usually the composition of the court who now revisits this is vastly changed. Look at the 14th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
When was the 14th Amendment put in place? General time frame. Post-Civil War, late 1800s. That's your separate but equal. That's
Yeah.
14th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's late 1880s.
Yes.
It's accepted, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many living members of the court were around for Brown v. Board in 54? How many politicians were? How many special interests that put those justices in or those members of Congress in place in the 1880s after the Civil War were still around and still interested? Few, if any.
Yeah.
Few, if any. So I think it's, although I understand and appreciate where you're coming from, I also, again, I'm a historian. I was trained as a historian, meaning that's my degree is in.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at things in time scales, and I think that that's part of it. And I think that's actually part of the genius of the design. I have this absolute fascination with the Founding Fathers and the Constitution of the United States, and then even the Bill of Rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize that the nation as we know it really didn't come into being until like 1786 as a general thing, because we had 10 years under the Articles of Confederation and they were a fucking abysmal failure.
Yeah.
And it's almost 10 years after that we get the final ratification. Everything's actually there. And the United States, as we see it, really exists. Like solid. You know, so that's...
Well, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
So the problem I have with this is the Supreme Court justices I agree with you that they're in a unique position. They are clearly in a unique
extremely unique
to prohibit injustices from occurring based on what the Constitution says. But my point is that there is wiggle room in determining what the Constitution looks like, which means when there's wiggle room, there's political room.
Yes.
And if the Supreme Court... So look at Scalia dies.
Yep.
And
now
Obama tries to put somebody on.
Yeah, someone who's actually fairly middle of the road in their history and record.
And they won't, because that is going to be... it's going to tip the scales one way or another. I mean...
well... It was also that it's not just a matter of tipping the scales. It's their way of giving a final fuck you to President Obama, saying, ha, 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 you might have gotten fucking Affordable Care Act, but you won't have a fucking Supreme Court justice, motherfucker.
Right. Well,
it's like, okay.
Yeah.
You guys are dicks.
But it's a really, okay, so let's say that Donald Trump gets elected.
And I just shuddered inside.
Yeah. And so let's say that Trump gets elected.
And now if he does, someone's going to hear this, and in a post-Trump world, we're both going to jail.
Yeah. Heil. Heil Donald.
My Trump.
Yeah. So you get my point, though, so they're uniquely insulated, but when you have things like the Citizens United decision, which affects the politicians who get elected. And the politicians are the ones who confirm the justices that get elected. You already see it at the small scale or at the state level, where there are justices who are elected because super PACs support them. Well, super PACs support them because they favor tort reform, or they want to make it harder for, they want to win more healthcare cases. So they elect pro-management healthcare judges.
Sure.
So you've already seen it in the petri dishes of the states. I don't see.
So are you? Oh, okay. I think I know where you're going with this. So you're saying if a state level judge, because that's the breeding, that's your farm team for your federal system.
Sure.
So you're saying that they're going to be shaped and called early on, and their lines, if you will, they're going to draw their lines in the sand with where they line up.
It's already happening.
So those kind of fundamental formative influences in the formative years of a judge are going to
well, I wouldn't
give
even
you
say
a
that.
sense.
The formative is green, and it's about 4 inches long and an inch wide.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I mean, it's money.
Yeah.
Money does it all.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about those formative years of a judge where they're starting to get their feet wet as a judge. Mm-hmm. And then if they do well, they'll get selected to the federal level. Because it is important to differentiate, I think, because this is another issue, right? People are ignorant.
Yeah.
You can be a state level judge. You can be a judge who's elected, who can be within a state system, and you go in Massachusetts, we'll say, you go all the way up to Superior Court.
Yes.
And you could spend your entire life there. You could. I'm just saying. You could spend your entire life in that trajectory.
Yeah.
And that's the culmination of your career. Here's the thing: you can make a fucking decision, and if someone wants, they'll take it to the federal court. So you can be trumped by the lowest level federal court and have your decisions overturned.
Yeah. It's not that easy, but yes.
I know it's not. I'm simplifying the process.
Yes.
What I'm saying is there are tiers.
Yes.
And even the justice trajectories, there's respect and regard for the rule of federal law over state.
Yes.
And then it's got to go all the way through the federal appeals to then get to the Supreme Court. So I believe, there are so many layers to it. It becomes very difficult to control and influence at that highest level when someone sits for a long enough time. How do you fuck with a Ginsburg? That bitch don't care.
Yes.
She's 300 fucking years old.
Yes. Yes.
She don't give a shit no more.
Yeah.
All she gives a fuck about is, and she just gives a fuck about, I don't know, fucking getting her tapioca pudding before bed. but it's interesting to me that over time, and if we look at the course of history of our nation, oddly enough, we have continued to move forward in a socially progressive sense. We evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So my kind of like, I use that as one of the underpinnings of my argument, is that things do get better. And it's this weird thing. And I don't know if it's a control, but it's almost like going back to that theory of evolution, right? You just can't stop it. And that's strange to me, but I see it. And I can't really pinpoint it, but it's an observation. And I haven't quite pinned the tail on the fucking donkey what that observation means, but I do know what it doesn't mean. And what it doesn't mean is that you cannot manipulate and stop the forward progress of things getting better. You just can't. People fight. And within our system, within a caste system, you can. I mean, fucking North Korea does a great job of it. No, I'm serious. Mm-hmm. But our system is this unique creature, talking about that free market capitalism stuff, which is actually a separate entity. Our economic engine that drives us is a separate entity altogether. It's clearly different than what is our form of government. They might be, they are definitely symbiotic, but they are two separate entities. And our form of government predates our capitalist, our adaptation, our adoption of capitalism as our economic system.
Yeah,
and it continues to regulate and drive it.
The issue that I have is, and I think even while we were talking, I read far too many political conspiracy,
they're fun
fictions, but it does. If you allow so much money into politics and all of these positions ultimately relate back to what the average person, what they vote, the vote counts. Your vote counts. Your vote counts whether you vote
if you fucking show up.
Yep. Vote counts because it determines ultimately who gets selected as president, and then who gets selected. The president's going to appoint the Supreme Court justice who's going to determine what's legal and what's illegal, or what's constitutional and what's unconstitutional. The concern that I have is if the average voter is apathetic, it doesn't do anything, and you allow money to get in, and people aren't paying attention, which we know that they're not paying attention, then you get I don't know, I want to say one issue. That's not the right word, but they're confusing issues or rhetoric.
Yeah, and it also becomes self-fulfilling prophecy.
And so you get the rhetoric spitters who nobody really knows what they're going to do.
Yep.
And before you know it, then they've put somebody up that's not qualified to be a justice, but your Senate or your House is full of people
who are idiots or bought off. Sure.
Hopefully are there because they represent the will of the people and are going to vote against that stuff. But the problem is if money is in politics there and people are not paying attention, then certainly the potential exists that, and the problem is, it's just theoretical potential at this point. There's no way that the founding fathers thought that we would ever have this much money. Yeah. Or that they could have envisioned this.
Absolutely.
And so
they'd be in awe.
You're looking
they
at
saw
me.
what they had today.
Yeah, well, you're looking at me kind of like, that's a really great idea, but it's pie in the sky. It's never going to happen. But the problem is it's already happening.
No. Actually, I was looking at you like that because I agree. Because, all right, so, no, you made a good point, and I want to kind of
one tonight.
Open it up a little. Yeah. Jeff, you're very. I thoroughly enjoy talking with you and discussing with you, and it's funny. There's no need for us to find disagreement. The conversation, I believe, is for me, anyways. It's been interesting.
Yeah.
And if whoever's out there doesn't find it interesting, fuck off. You can go listen to another podcast. This is about me wanting to have interesting conversations with people who I've always found interesting in my life.
Sure.
And you're one of those people, and you bring up interesting points. But here's a cool thing, and I thought about this, and here's some weight to your argument. If a rhetoric-spitting moron can become the nominee for one of our major political parties, and for anyone who's not following, I'm talking about Donald Trump. He's a fucking idiot. If he can do that, and he can get into that position to appoint unqualified people, so people like himself, he has the ability now to put people like himself into positions like his own, which means he's an unqualified person sitting in a position, and he's going to appoint unqualified people for other positions. First time around might not take hold because you currently have within the House and the Senate, you still have people who have served for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So they're old guard, we'll say. There's enough of the old guard around where they're going to stop it. And you kind of see that implosion of the Republican Party going on right now.
Yes.
And there's going to be huge, and not only that, you have steadfast, go fuck yourself on the Democratic side.
Yes.
So it's just that won't happen. But that uninformed and absolutely criminally stupid electorate who allowed for that person to get there are going to be voting in succeeding elections.
Well,
so
I don't know that they will, though. I don't know that they will.
I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
That lack of that apathy.
Yeah.
Is going to affect further downstream elections.
Yes.
So it's only a matter of time before enough of them have voted in enough elections, or enough of them have voted enough elections and then stopped voting again, to where the other fucking idiots that they've put in become the majority. The majority of your people on both sides of the aisle in these houses are fucking idiots. And then you have another fucking idiot get appointed and get into that place, and now he can change it. And that right there, that truly is the fulfillment of Idiocracy.
Another great movie.
Fantastic movie, which unfortunately will probably lead to, because this is going to happen simultaneously with the automation of jobs and stuff like that. So now we're going to dovetail Idiocracy with Wall-E, and we're fucked.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest fear for the state of American politics right now. Going back to where we started.
So here's
is
the
that
deal,
we might
too.
be really fucked.
You're I'm not putting a judgment call, and I'm saying it tongue in cheek, but I'm not putting a judgment call on your concern over Donald Trump, but it's just as likely that I could see Hillary Clinton putting up a nominee that's serving a separate purpose, but just as extreme as Trump is. And I could see her putting up, another ultra-liberal justice who erodes privacy or erodes individual freedoms, upholds socialist prerogatives, laws, agendas. That's the concern. You had said the markup. So I guess circling back to that, I understand the merit in somebody who's going to meet in the middle of the road. I do agree, but the concern with that again is, are you representing those people who are underrepresented?
Is it? Yeah, I agree. Is it in our collective best interest for that in the long term? And I can understand that conflict and that internal debate. And I guess for me, it goes back to what I said, looking at things over the long time. I think the inevitability of progress and progression and the bettering of people across the board is inevitable. You can't stop it. In that sense, I think you can completely undo everything.
Yeah.
And my fear, and I truly believe this, my fear is that Donald Trump is not just rhetoric. It's that megalomania, and he truly believes it. And that could be absolutely fucking disastrous, not just to us as a nation, but the globe.
Is Donald Trump racist?
I think he's an idiot.
But is he racist? It really irritates me that people call him racist because I'm not sure he's racist.
I don't know if he's racist, but I know there's a lot of very racist people who really like him.
Right. I don't disagree with that statement. But
And
does
he
that
doesn't
make him racist?
But he doesn't disavow it. I don't know.
Okay, well,
I don't know.
fair point. Yeah, he doesn't disavow.
He doesn't disavow it, and I would say that he might be indifferent to it, and I'm a little more concerned about indifference.
Okay, fair point.
I've always said my own belief is that true. So people will equate hate with evil. I don't think hate is evil. Hate is the opposite of love. It's very similar to it. And usually you can't hate something, like truly hate, until it started off at like, at least in like an idealized idea of love, and something went wrong and it led to hate, right? So that's not evil. Hate can lead to bad things. Evil is indifference. You just don't care.
Yeah.
Psychopaths are indifferent.
Yeah.
Sociopaths who become psychopaths are mute. They're indifferent. They don't care.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And so I'm with you. I think labeling him as a racist is kind of simplistic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really kind of dig into the deeper things, which, I mean, you know this. I like to go deeper. I hate just kind of like superficial thinking. But I'm with you. I don't know if he is. I like to think he's not, because I look at his the woman that's been taking a beating being his national spokesperson. Mm-hmm. She's really good looking. I think she's black. I don't know, but she's a really good looking mixed ethnicity chick.
Sure.
But she wouldn't be there. Like, I mean, she wouldn't be there. I think for him, it's kind of like what you were talking about, Green. He doesn't give a fuck what color you are. Are you competent, and do you listen to him, and do you buy into it?
Yeah.
That's all he gives a shit about.
Yeah.
Are you going to pat him on the back and tell him he's the greatest ever? He doesn't give a fuck what color you are. As long as you pat him on the back and tell him he's the greatest ever, and yes, Donald, please save us from everything. Yeah. You do that, and he's cool with you. You can be fucking purple. Yep. And he'd be fine with you. So yeah, I'd probably agree with you, with kind of like your hesitation to buy that he anyways is racist, but that doesn't mean he does not fan and manipulate and take advantage of quote unquote racial tensions. Yeah. And I have an issue with that.
I don't like when I see people immediately attack him because they say you are a racist. Wait a minute. When you get down deep, yeah, you know, then okay, so I get it, and maybe
I think he's a bully.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the lack of a denial is an affirmation. But I just don't see people. That's not what they're saying. Yeah, you know, you sir are denying that you are this, so therefore you are that. But they just label him as something, and I'm like, wait, that's.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those issues that's extremely emotionally charged. Yeah, and it's really hard to separate the tree from the forest from the trees, and it's also really hard because people are so sensitive about it. It's such an emotionally charged thing. Yeah, is that sometimes you just avoid it, or you realize when you're like you'll try to have a very reasonable, logical discussion. And someone just instantaneously, you hit that nerve and they go down that road and they can't stop. Yeah. It's an emotional chain. And some of it's justified, but again, a lot of it, in my opinion, comes from ignorance of history. Mm-hmm. It comes from ignorance of understanding. And sometimes our own emotional connection to something that is so personal clouds us. Yeah. And you can't really have that conversation. But I don't think that you can just make the blanket, or you can't. It's very hard to justify that claim, that accusation. I would agree with you there. But he is a bully. He clearly is a bully. Mm-hmm. Look what he did to Megyn Kelly was disgusting. Yeah, he's a chauvinist. Yeah, that's for fucking sure. Yeah. He's a bully. He's a chauvinist. He's a bigot. Yeah. But I mean, we're all bigoted. Mm-hmm. But he's ignorant of his bigotedness. You know what I mean? And he can't do any wrong. And again, I come back to that whole megalomania, that he's a megalomaniac. And I don't know if he's ever been diagnosed with it. Probably not, because he probably never went to go see someone. But I'd be willing to bet there's plenty of psychologists who look at him and go, yeah, he's a classic megalomaniac. But he's not alone. There's a lot of billionaires who are megalomaniacs.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could even say anyone who goes into politics has
a strand. Sure.
Yeah, sure. You're going to have some hubris.
Sure.
You're going to you have to have something of an ego to feel, you know what? The world's fucked up, but I can fix it.
Yeah.
But you also got to be almost shameless in it.
Yeah.
Hey, you want me? No, I don't. Yes, you do. I mean, there's like the used car salesman kind of thing that goes into it that's a little disconcerting.
Yeah.
But I do think I've always been fond of politics. I don't think it's as a calling. I think it's noble. Yeah. I think it has become fairly slimy in the way that you get there.
Yeah.
And the higher you go, the more slimy, and the more you have to sell pieces of your soul, for lack of a better term, to the highest bidder.
Well, but if it's working properly, I don't think you have to do that.
I agree with you. I completely agree. 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
If it were to work properly.
We get voter turnout.
Yeah. Comes back to voter turnout, yeah. And I think fundamentally we both completely agree on that. Yeah. Everything else is nuance. And I think we both say, yeah, let's get voter turnout up. And I'd be willing to concede all of my theoretical of their arguments if it turned out and I was wrong on everything else, but the one thing I was right on is you got voter turnout and shit changed. I'd be like, hey, cool. Everything else I can concede, but I was right on that one. Thank you very much. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, I just want you to show the fuck up and give your civic responsibilities.
Yeah.
Live up to that. I want you to be half as good a citizen as you are a consumer.
Yeah. Well, easier said than done, unfortunately.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, if we could figure out how to run the presidency like American Idol, we'd probably have some of the best voter turnout in the history of the world.
Well, and that's why Donald Trump has the appeal.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly it. Because how many people? Well, he runs businesses.
Yeah.
You know?
Not well.
well, yeah, exactly. You know, they don't, but don't look behind the curtain, Stefan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Never mind that. Yeah. He opened a casino in Atlantic City, you know?
Yeah.
Even though it's closing, but
his name's in a bunch of buildings.
Yeah, well, he ran a business, so he's got to be great for Make America Great Again.
I know a Puerto Rican kid in Holyoke that his guy's name is on a bunch of buildings.
Yeah,
but he's called a tagger. It's called graffiti.
Yeah, well, it gets back to value.
Yeah,
what's the value of the name on the building?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of, the political stuff kind of went a little bit. I'm all for it, but I am curious. Yeah. Something I do want to ask you about, because you are something of a subject matter expert.
Sure.
The Olympics.
Okay.
And specifically gymnastics.
Yes.
Female gymnastics.
Okay.
And male. I really haven't followed the male. There hasn't been much
coverage. Yeah, it's been really poor.
But there hasn't been much hubbub about our male gymnastics team.
Yes.
Versus our female team, which just kicked ass and took names again.
Yes.
And there's a girl that has an insane tumbling pass.
Well, there's a couple.
A couple of them. But I mean, there's one I can't even remember her name.
So there's the two Americans are Simone Biles and Allie Raceman.
Uh-huh.
Simone is she's shorter. She's I think her floor routine is better. She won. Sorry, anybody who doesn't know this yet, but it already happened. So she won the all around last night. And then Allie is she's actually from Needham, I think from Needham or from Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what's amazing about this is 4 years ago when Gabby Douglas won, Allie Raceman came in third, tied for third, but actually ended up coming in fourth because of the tiebreaker mechanism. There was a statement made during the Olympics which is really accurate. If you consider the differentiation of points. Most American people understand the game of football, don't really understand gymnastics. To beat somebody by a point is the equivalent of like 2 to 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
It's just a huge...
because you're going in tenths of points when you're talking gymnastics.
It usually comes down to tenths of points, which is like winning a football game 13-14.
Yeah.
You know, it's that close when you're talking about points. So last the Olympics, Raceman came in third, but the tie-breaking mechanism led her into fourth. This time, she competed, and heading into the last event, she ended up overtaking the top spot prior to Simone Biles going. And Allie beat the next place finisher. She needed like a 14 to take the lead. She ended up getting like a 15-3. So she ended up beating the next closest person by 1.5 points, which is like 4 touchdowns. It's a huge score.
Yeah.
Simone Biles goes up and then beats Raceman by, I think, a whole point, or, you know, the grand total of things. So that means Biles has beat the third place finisher by nearly 3 points. I mean, literally, that's like when the Patriots go out and win 59-0.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing. So just incredibly, incredibly talented, incredibly well put together. The men's team is they just can't compete. Don't know why. You know, I think that the skill level is there. I think it's a real problem that I don't know. I don't know what the correlation is, but I think gymnasts are treated like they're treated like professional athletes. They're treated like rock stars in different countries. Like the guy that won the all around, Kohei, I'm going to say it wrong, Uchimura. Only because it's getting late for me. But Kohei wins. I mean, in Japan, the guy's got like, he's on billboards. I mean, he's famous.
Wow. Okay.
Just like people know him walking up and down the street. It's like soccer, football. You know, soccer is not popular in America. It's hugely popular in Europe. Gymnastics.
Everywhere else is probably, it's gigantic.
Gymnastics is hugely popular in the rest of the world, and just Americans don't care about it.
Yeah.
And I think so is there a talent drain? I don't know. Maybe not. It doesn't, for some reason, that doesn't add up to me. I mean, it does. I can understand why, you know, there's more focus. So the cream is rising to the top over there. They've got more involvement because there's more interest. But for Christ's sakes, it's America. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. So the guy that came in second was from the Ukraine. Like, you're telling me that the Ukraine has more resources than we do? Come on. No. So I don't know why, but historically the American men are weak on pommel horse. Don't know why. And then they just can't handle the pressure when you get to the top level.
Really?
Yeah, they just, it's about consistency. It doesn't, when you're at that level, everybody's doing hard stuff, but you can do your own stuff. It's artistic gymnastics. So it's not, you can do different maneuvers, but just for some reason, when the light is shining the brightest, the American men just don't do well. Don't know why. Something always seems to happen or always seems to go wrong. And, I think that I believe I had recalled that they were in team competition. They were in potential to score a medal, like third potentially. And then there was a fall. So, the pressure got to them. These guys never fall. But then they fall when they get on the big stage.
When it matters most.
Yeah. So I don't know why that is. I don't know. But the women are exciting to watch. They're pretty good. So,
do you feel that gymnastics as a sport is continuing to evolve at an accelerated rate? Like the difficulty, what people are doing now?
No,
or do you think it's kind of stagnated a little?
Well,
I mean, not female, but male gymnastics. I guess it's important to kind of differentiate between. I mean, it is important.
I think there's a limit of human ability.
Okay.
I mean, the stuff that these guys are doing is really otherworldly. I mean, you couldn't even 20 years ago, you couldn't even conceptualize some of the things that they're doing.
Really?
Like, especially when you look at like the high bar, you know, the men are doing, they do a double backflip over the bar and catch the bar.
It's because of the X Games.
Yeah. Well, probably.
Someone started doing a backflip with a fucking motorcycle, and they were like, "Oh, you got to be fucking kidding me, really?"
Yeah. So, but I look at, you know, when you look at the women's gymnastics, like some of the things that the tumbling passes that they do on the floor, they're not. Some of them are new, but they're not really that new. I mean, they might add an extra half twist, or they might do something. You know, they might do something a little bit more than before, but. At some point, I think that it levels off. Now, one of the interesting things that people who don't understand gymnastics don't know or aren't involved or care. Every year after the Olympics, the FIG, which is the Federation of International Gymnastics, they set out the code of points. And what the code of points does is it values every skill, and it values connections to skill. And so every year after the Olympics, they change the code of points. And what they do is they devalue skills they saw a lot of, and then they elevate skills that they haven't seen frequently. So like people see the iconic men's gymnastics maneuver is the Iron Cross. Iron Cross is hard to do. It's not easy. It's a hard maneuver.
Yeah.
But everybody was doing it because it was iconic. And there have been, you know, at least when I was doing gymnastics, it had gone through a series of point changes where generally skills are graded A, B, C, D, E. Some of them are F. F is real extreme. Those are like the double twisting, double flips over the high bar and grab it again. But the point is that, you know, most skills are, most skills that you're seeing at the Olympics are DE connections. An Iron Cross, when I started gymnastics, was ranked as a C, and then it got downgraded to a B, and then it got regraded back to a C. And the reason why they do that is because it's not that the skill got harder or less hard. It's just, what do the people want to see? Yeah. So your original question to me was, is gymnastics getting so extreme? I'm not sure, because the code changes. And so when the code changes, you see different skills.
Oh, so you don't have a constant to really measure that off of.
Exactly.
I got you.
It's not. It's always changing. So you know, you're going to see new skills. Yeah. But so a popular vault now, like I'm willing to bet that after watching these Olympic Games, a lot of the women do what's called the Yurchenko vault, where they do like a round off onto the board and then do a backflip over the board and go off. Everybody's doing that, so I'm willing to bet that will be some sort of, it'll be downgraded, so you won't see as much. Or they'll amend it. So it's not that got easier. That didn't get easier to do. It's
fucking
still
hard
really
as hell.
Fucking hard. Yeah, but they're just, you know, the judges don't want to see it as much anymore. Or, you know, in order to keep gymnastics interesting, they want to change it and make something now. And maybe that's an extreme example because that's still really hard to do, so maybe they won't change that one, but that's a good example of how it operates. Judges, you know, the FIG can determine values of skills and then make you do things differently based on that.
What's the name of the Iron Cross? It's like is it a front lever where you're this way?
That is called Maltese.
The Maltese.
Yes.
That's insanely difficult, correct?
That's, yeah. Well, that went through a code change as well. I think that used to be, no, that was always a D. That likely will be downgraded because everybody does that now.
So when you look at a Maltese,
yes,
as a judge,
yes,
are they looking? Do they look at the angle of how open your arm is, how much it becomes less dependent upon the lat and more on like just the shoulder strength?
No, I don't, because
out of curiosity.
Yeah, because I think physically it would be.
There's a point. There's a point where there's going to be. Well, I mean, theoretically, yeah, I agree with you. There's probably a point where the angle can only get so open. Yeah, and then you just don't have enough contractile force to maintain the position.
No, yeah. What they're looking for is your body straight and are you even with the rings?
Oh, okay.
Are you, meaning is your body below the rings like a lever, or is your body above the rings like a planche, or are you actually even with the rings? So are you parallel with the ground? So is that kind of where the virtuosity thing comes in? If you're totally level, you've nailed it. Where if you're in a
lever, you've missed it a little bit. If you're in a planche, you're not quite there.
Yeah. So virtuosity is a statement of doing something better than what it was sort of intended, or the best possible way.
Yeah, something exceptionally well, right?
It's actually it's sort of the opposite, in that if you attempt the skill but you're too high or too low, you would get a deduction.
Okay, so it's virtuosity is doing something common uncommonly well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good way to put it. So they've really virtuosity was a statement used like in the late up through the 80s anyways, and in the 90s they kind of got rid of it.
I learned it from Glassman.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Because he applies that to the basic fundamentals of like being able to do an air squat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were things like sticking a landing used to be considered virtuosity.
Uh-huh.
Because it was, really hard to do. So you'd get an extra bonus point for sticking the landing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sticking the landing is the expectation. So I haven't looked at the code of points in years. I don't know if it's still worth a bonus point or not, but it's a great example of, it's sort of, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Well, that's not accurate at all, but if you stick, you get a bonus point, but if you take a step, you get a deduction.
Yeah.
So how do you ever land and not get, how is your landing ever what it's supposed to be?
Okay. I'm fine.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if you stick, you get a bonus point, but if you move, you lose a 10.
Yeah, there's no zero.
Where is there?
Yeah, there's no zero.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the notion of virtuosity, is that landing and sticking is getting you a bonus point.
Yeah.
They don't do that much anymore. It's really just strictly based on, and that's where you get, instead of getting 10s, you now get 16s. Or you get, the start values have changed dramatically, where a good score is in like the 15, 16 range, because it's based on an accumulation of skill rather than everything is a 10 and you can get up to a 10 based on, getting virtuosity for your skills or...
you can accumulate a perfect 10, but it's going to be really fucking hard.
Yes. Now it's nobody ever gets 10s because start values, you're limited in the number of skills that you can do, but start values at that level are between 15 and 16. I mean, I suppose it's hypothetical that you could have a 17 as a start value or an 18, and then you get deductions, but it's based on, it's not a, using the term wrong, but a zero sum. It's based on what skills you're putting together, sort of affirmatively earning the points, as opposed to everybody starts at a 10 and then we deduct you down and we add points back in.
Or you're working towards a 10. In this case, they're saying what you're attempting is this high.
Yes.
And how well you do it will be based upon that scale.
Yes. Yep.
So you're kind of, because not only, so in that essence, it kind of puts into an element of competing against yourself also.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not just competing against your competitor. It's, this is what you say you can do. Yeah. Can the best you show up and do it? Because it's kind of like saying, listen, the best, if we'll say if you have a theoretical 18,
yep,
and you have a competitor who shows up and their best as a 15 starting value, the best you doesn't even need to show up, and you could potentially beat the best them that shows up.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's precisely accurate. So trying to give an example to that situation, the easiest one that I can think of is the balance beam, because in that situation you'll often see people, you'll see women doing connections on things, and what that means is they'll do a backflip and go, as soon as they land, they'll jump up and do whatever, straddle jump. When you are putting those two items together, you could potentially get a connection. And so when you're getting a connection, you are increasing the difficulty of those two things. Okay. So that the backflip immediately into the straddle jump is worth a point, one whole point. Whereas if you did a backflip, stopped, and then did a straddle jump, the backflip may be worth half a point, and the straddle jump itself is worth 2/10.
Okay.
So 1 point versus 7/10.
Yep.
That's what they get start value. Now, you could have the person do a backflip with the straddle jump and then, shake when they land, wiggle, or maybe they have flexed toes. So they've lost a 10th in deduction, versus the person who does the backflip, lands, then does a straddle jump. They do both of those elements perfectly, no deduction, but the value is higher because you had the connection.
Yep.
So even though you got a deduction, your start value is higher.
Yep.
So that's, yes, when you explained it, that So I could screw something up and like miss a connection.
Yeah.
But my start value is higher than the other person's start value. So it doesn't matter because I may have not done my best routine, but my best is still better than what their best is, even with the deduction.
Okay, so now I'm kind of rethinking what I initially thought when you said, yeah, I think I read a 10. I was like, well, that's fucking stupid. But I guess this actually makes sense because it acknowledges someone's not limited by, someone is only limited by their potential and ability to achieve the highest level stuff, invent new stuff. So like you said, that individual and that artistic stuff.
Yeah.
So on a 10 system, I'm going to give a 10 value based upon what I think is the governing body, what's theoretically possible. But actually that perfect 10 might be preventing some. So the two same people, the one who has the 18 and the one who has the 15 starting value. Yeah. Now we put them and they both show up in the 10 system.
Yeah.
The person who now was the 18 value, but they're doing now, quote unquote, a 10 value, and they screw up their routine and they get a 9. They get a 9.
Yeah.
The person who had a 15, they show up and they nail theirs, they get a 9.5.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden the person who actually doesn't, who has, and I hate to put it this way because you're dealing at such a high level, but it still applies. The person with lesser potential was able to execute a less difficult, risky routine and was rewarded for it versus the person whose potential is much higher and is recognized as a better gymnast was put together a very high, hard routine, but they bobbled it and they're penalized for it.
Yes, that's how I understand it, and I may be wrong. That's how I understand it. But even if that's not, even if not, that chain is not exactly how it occurred. The notion that somebody is going to be rewarded by initially putting out a more difficult set. What it used to be was, in order to get a 10, you had to do 3 Ds, an E, 2 Cs.
Okay,
whatever.
so that was built into it. There was certain criteria.
Yes. Now
you
you
a
could
certain
select,
level of difficulty.
Right. You could select how you did it, and you could select the order, and you could select connection and all those things. But
They
you were
had to be
required
there.
to hit certain minimums. Now you're still required to hit certain minimums, like you have to show a strength move on rings. You have to show a swing move on rings. But the way that you put you are rewarded for doing harder things in your set. You're not capped at a 10. Your cap is as high as you can make it go and still put on a decent routine or meet certain criteria.
You bring up rings. Okay, so that now gymnastics scoring, when you put it in context, we discussed it, now it makes more sense. And I think that the way it is now, the simple scoring, like that start value, way better system.
Yes.
Me personally. I think it rewards those who are of higher caliber and bigger risk takers, as it should. But you got to fucking show up.
Iconic 10 and people don't like change.
So when going back to rings, because this is something that just made me think of it as you mentioned rings, it brought it back my brain back to it. When you talk about, okay, so what? Because I don't know much about rings.
Sure.
What is a harder strength move than a Maltese?
There's not much.
Okay, good. All right, my brain's not that fucked off then.
Yep, I can't remember what, I think it's called a Coleman, but I can't remember. No. Essentially, the Malteses, you are parallel to the ground with your stomach facing down. There's actually a maneuver where you're doing it the opposite way, where you're parallel to the ground, but your back is facing the ground. I don't think no, that's not true. I've seen one occur in competition ever. There probably is more. I just haven't seen them. I think one was done at Olympic level, but rather what happens, people earn points by the transition with which they get into the Maltese.
Okay.
So,
well, that's gonna be my next question. Okay.
Yeah, so they could do like they could do a kip, which is like you turn your body over and get into it immediately, or it could be a sort of a thing where people will do a maneuver where they somehow get into an iron cross and then pull out of the iron cross and go right into that position, or there could be a swing, which is like called the back uprise, which is when you're swinging, swinging, and then you know, in the back, you sort of kick your feet up to get on top of the rings.
Yep.
People will, you know, back uprise immediately into a Maltese.
That's impressive.
Yeah, they're all impressive.
Yeah. Well, of the ones you just described, I think for me in my head, that's the most impressive, just because you're going from this state of motion to stop.
Yeah. Well,
and that's crazy. Not like a strength sense, but like in an arresting movement sense.
Yeah.
Into a very difficult strength position. Wow. That's impressive to me.
The one that's been ever impressive to me is, it's called an Azarian, and it's where they'll start in an iron cross, and then literally what they do is they pull their toes over as they sort of pull out of the iron cross maneuver, they're sort of pulling up, and they're also rolling their toes over backwards, like over their face. And they basically backwards roll into a Maltese.
Oh, wow.
Incredibly difficult and super impressive. So if you think the back uprise is good, you should take a look at that one. You'd like it even more. Really, really, really hard to do because it's the swing moves are more technically proficient. The Azarian move is you have to be just unbelievably strong and technically proficient.
Yeah.
Whereas
a shit ton of accuracy.
Yes. Yeah. That's
in
why
a lot of planes.
Yes. Yeah. So exactly. I mean, it's just total control of where your body is moving and understanding where you are and the physics of where you are.
Yeah, in a good rotational sense too.
And you are at the whole time applying force, whereas a swing movement, you're kind of just
there's momentum.
Yeah. You're applying force in the right way, but then you're just sort of applying it to where you land at the right position.
That's true. I didn't think about that. There's a certain in the momentum sense, if you're really good and your kinesthetic is on, your kinesthetic awareness is dialed in, you generate just enough force to get you to where you need to be, and then you can stop it.
Yeah, a great example for, I don't know how many people who are listening are CrossFit fans, but the sort of CrossFitters think a muscle up is a swing into a muscle up. But you could also do a strict muscle up, which you don't see all that often. But having attempted them both, that a strict muscle up is 10,000 times harder than a swinging muscle up.
It's an absolute,
It's the difference between a back uprise Maltese and an Azarian.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Because, the
Azarian's the strict, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, holy shit.
And it's really the same. Imagine instead of doing a muscle up where you're pulling the rings down, you're pulling and then doing a backwards roll without swing into that Maltese position.
Yeah, that's all.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is. Is
there an inverted cross?
And that's what it's called.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Inverted cross. It's like a handstand, but your arms are wide.
So, and this is just an if. I'm not saying anyone ever had.
That's a great example of a move that was valued, really difficult when it first came out. And then the judges saw a whole lot of them and said, everybody's doing this, we don't want to see it anymore, and they devalued it.
Oh, wow.
It was originally a D when it came out, and then it became a C, and people say, why would I work so hard to just get a C? I'm not doing that move anymore.
Yeah.
So you don't see it as much anymore because it was devalued. Because
but do people still train it for its strength value in training? I mean, there's a lot of strength involved.
Yeah, no, gymnastics isn't really,
doesn't look at it that way?
Yeah, it's good to be training different skills and trying new things and trying to learn new things.
But you got to really kind of master a skill.
Yeah, you're working to master certain things as opposed to being really good at everything.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what you're the best at.
I'd be willing to bet that's why you have a lot of injuries, though.
Oh, sure.
Because there's the overuse.
Yeah, not well-rounded.
Yeah.
You're focusing on the same things. Yeah, absolutely.
So, out of curiosity, I'm gonna,
or at least that's how I did it. Maybe training's different now.
I don't think so.
But
I don't think so because I think it's one of those if it ain't broke.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of a rooted system. It's a subculture.
Well,
it's
but
always
that's a good
been
question.
renowned for its insane drive and work ethic that it instills.
So one of the things I find fascinating is Great Britain has been terrible for a long time. Maybe not terrible is the right word, but really not. They just
Not overly impressive.
They weren't anybody. They were nobody. When the Olympics went to London, they did very well and medaled. They medaled again this year, or at least they came very close. And they've talked about how they took a different sort of path to their, or a different training mechanism. And they focused on more efficient movements and more effective movements than strict repetition. So when I'm saying,
So you started doing CrossFit.
yeah, well, yeah, it's more. I think there's an element
someone
of
just
functional
lost
to
their
it.
shit. Someone just lost their shit because I said that.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, that's funny.
But I think that's the point that they were trying to make is, look, we don't just get up there and do 10 iron crosses anymore. We do 3 iron crosses, and then we're focusing on doing something else as well, or we're being smarter about how we train.
Yeah.
So part of the reason is, I think U.S. men's gymnastics, or at least what I understand of it, is they're doing what they were doing back in 1984 when it worked really well. Now the skills are harder, but the training mentality is the same. Or at least that's how
the
I
methodology to get there hasn't changed much at all. There hasn't been much of a revolution in the training methodology.
I think so.
Possibly the sport. I mean, admittedly, the sport itself, the expectation of the athlete, but the path to get there hasn't changed much. The template is a template.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask a question, and this is out of curiosity for me. And again,
Sure.
like I said earlier, if no one out there finds this interesting, feel free to fuck off. I might be the only person on earth who tells his audience to feel free to fuck off as much as possible, whatever audience I have. But so if someone's, and I'm just going to use to go back to the Maltese, I'm wondering about like transitions and stuff like that. So I guess I'm kind of wondering theoretically what the difficulty of this would be, regardless of whether or not it were possible.
Yeah.
If someone were to go from, say, an L-sit iron cross,
Okay.
and then from there, without pulling back in, and again, this is all theoretical,
Yep.
they piked up into an inverted iron cross
Yes.
and then controlled down into a Maltese. Now, the whole time staying extended.
Yes.
One, I don't know if that's possible
Yeah.
or close to, but would that be rated as a very high?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what happens, like we had talked about before, the act of connecting one skill to another skill is earning you points.
Yep.
So there's a difference between, doing an iron cross in an L-sit to, that you pull your arms together and then press up into a handstand and lower down into an inverted cross, versus being in an iron cross and then just inverting
Rolling
your body.
into it. Yeah.
And yeah, there are ways like, I'm trying to think. So the Azarian is like the backwards roll I was talking about.
Yep.
There are common transitions that occurred, at least when I was back in college, would be like if you were in an iron cross, you would just pull your arms together while leaning forward to get into a Maltese. So you're literally, it's not exactly what you were talking about going from iron cross to an inverted iron cross, but the same idea. You're going from an iron cross and literally just pulling your arms together, leaning forward to get into a Maltese. The other, that's one transition, which is hard. But that Azarian was coming out at the time, or, started to be done at the time when I was in college, which is the iron cross backwards roll into a Maltese. That's more difficult. So even though you're doing an iron cross and a Maltese, the transition of backwards rolling into the Maltese is more difficult, will get you more points.
Okay.
So how people get into the skills is just, if not more, important than the skills they're actually doing, because those connections are what get you the points.
Okay.
That's the real technical proficiency of what people who are admiring the sport are looking for. How complex of transitions are they doing? Are they just, every time are they pulling back up into support, which is just holding yourself up on the rings or whatever? Are they just pulling up into support and going into another move, or are they backward? Are they doing a backwards roll, or are they doing some sort of a swing maneuver into it, or are they doing, a strength move to another strength move to another strength move? It matters. The transition matters, how they do it, but that's what makes it artistic, I guess.
Yeah. I never realized when I asked you if there's anything harder than Maltese. I didn't realize that. And it's interesting because I know of the front lever.
Yeah.
But I guess it was always one of those, if you look at like physical culture, it was like one of those things that people did a lot of bar work, like the bartenders and stuff like that do now. Like that's considered a very high level of accomplishment to be able to, even with a straight bar, like a pull-up bar, do a front lever.
Yeah.
And be fully level with the ground.
Yeah.
So I guess never even crossed my mind to do it with rings. Although
a front lever is a thing on the rings as well, but what we're talking about is not, front
is the reverse of a Maltese.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. That's a front lever is probably a B.
Yeah.
Where the opposite of a Maltese would be an E. So you're talking about, jumping 4 grades essentially of a skill level. So yeah, significantly harder.
Yeah.
But good concept.
Sorry, wrong term.
That's okay.
But yeah, I mean that. Can you do that same thing on a parallel bar? I guess not, because your hips would be in contact, right?
Well,
but you can get close to it, like you said, being in a lever versus a planche. So you can be in like that lever-like position.
Yeah.
Is it harder? Or do you think at that point it's fucking difficult?
Well, you don't see strength moves really on the parallel bars because everything's based, the code is set up that
momentum.
Yeah, they're emphasizing swing moves. They want
generation
to see
power and flying.
Yeah, they want to see you, and sometimes
they want to see releases and stuff like that. Yeah.
Precisely.
More acrobatic.
If the code was set up to see those sorts of skills, then you would see them more. But that's just not what the code is, and so that's not how it goes. But again, just because the code says one thing is harder than another doesn't mean that something is not as hard.
Yeah. So I was kind of just asking, as your experience, how would you compare the two? If you were to choose an implement to do it on, because in my head, I would think theoretically each implement has its strengths, oddly enough, because you can manipulate rings in a way which is beneficial to some people because you're moving through it. There's no obstacle in the way, but a bar is actually fixed.
So it's easiest, in my opinion, so a handstand is a good example. Easiest to do a handstand on parallel bars.
Okay.
And I would argue, many people would not argue, but I would argue the next easiest place to do a handstand is on the rings, and then the third easiest is on the floor. Only because when you're on the rings, it depends on. I mean, you got to understand, and this is when I was a full-time gymnast, and you can grab the rings, and so you're actually grabbing onto something, and you can manipulate it better with your hands. Whereas the floor is difficult to manipulate because all you can do is use your fingers, and that's it.
Oh, I got you. So you're talking about once you have a sense of the apparatus.
Yeah. So when I was actually a competitive level gymnast, I think it was easier to do a handstand on the rings than it was on the floor, because I could manipulate the piece better.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense, because once you include grip, you actually have more muscular force available to you. So you're actually working with more. Yeah.
And maybe, maybe I'm making all that up. That's just how I remember it.
No.
But the parallel bars for sure is the easiest, because you're able to grab something.
And so it's fixed.
You can manipulate your wrists and your hands better to achieve balance. And it's fixed. It's not going anywhere. Whereas the floor, again, it's just your flat hand on the ground, and you can't control anything that's going on there. So it's all your body to hold yourself up.
I was actually going to ask you a question. So do you think it would? I bet you it would. I bet your answer would be yes, and if I'm wrong, tell me so. But it would probably be more difficult to do a handstand on a pull-up bar than it would on the rings.
Yes, I think so. Because it's probably awkward.
Yes.
In terms of, where your hand placement is. And
there's less margin for error.
Precisely. And it's, again, another difficult to manipulate piece of item, even though it's static, but it doesn't work well with your musculature.
Yeah.
Whereas on the rings, it fits where your shoulders are. And so you're
you can put it where you need it.
Yeah, you're in a natural upside down position. Whereas most people, you would rarely ever see handstands on one bar, on the parallel bars. You do see them occasionally. And oftentimes they're highly rated skills because it's difficult to do. Because it's difficult to do a handstand on one bar. You wouldn't see it with your hands sort of knuckles facing in the same direction. What you would see is them holding it like that.
Okay,
which
yeah,
is,
counterbalance.
Yeah, your thumbs pointing in opposite directions. One facing left, one facing right, whereas both facing left. Or
because that gives you an ability to kind of cinch down. Yeah.
So that gives you some additional leverage. But, yeah, that answers the question.
Yeah. Okay. So that does. So yeah. So depending on the move and depending on where you're at, a pull-up bar can be more difficult than the rings.
Yes. It could also,
it could be reversed. So I would go to say it actually depends on the plane of space you're in. So if you're above, the pull-up bar becomes more difficult in static like type hold type of stuff. Whereas the rings, like you said, the implement allows you to because you're inside them, allows for a different kind of manipulation. So like the handstand as an example.
Yeah, well, and we say that, but, I suppose I've never thought about training strength on a single bar, being over it.
Other than pull-ups?
Well, you're underneath the bar.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm talking about is, being on one bar and doing press hands. I mean, that's a common thing where you practice a press handstand on one bar on the parallel bars. Which is where you're basically sitting in an L seat. You pull your feet between your hands, but over the bar, and muscle yourself up into a handstand. You do see those on one rail, one bar of the parallel bars, but you just don't see all that many other strength moves involved in that.
I am going to have a newfound appreciation, I think, for when I watch acrobat type of stuff, like the Cirque du Soleil.
Oh yeah,
and like the bar manipulation kind of stuff, like that whole like fascination with like flags and different variations of flags.
Yes. Yeah.
I now, after this kind of talk and you kind of explaining stuff, I now have a real newfound, and I had an utmost regard for it, but now I kind of have a newfound respect for it.
Well, it's funny knowing some people that have done that stuff. They're always. They get it's part of the job, but they always laugh that the stuff that's really easy is the stuff that the crowd likes, and the stuff that they do that's really hard, the crowd usually they don't really care about.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, exactly. So, people will do a couple handsprings or, do handsprings really fast. That's not hard to do.
Yeah.
But then, so they'll do that, and then they'll do a full twisting double layout, and the crowd will be like, less interested in that than somebody doing a bunch of handsprings in a row real fast.
Yeah, whipping around in place going.
Yes, yeah. So I'm sure that all those folks will be appreciative that you appreciate the strength involved in those static holds. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting when you watch, and I just use Cirque du Soleil as a point of reference, but when you watch this, you see some insane... Forget the tumbling stuff. You see some really impressive raw strength stuff done on different kinds of implements and stuff like that. And I know I've seen the contortionist kind of acrobat things. I've seen women and men do stuff on a bar.
Yes.
A single bar.
Yeah.
And go as far as one-handed handstands and balance. And now, based upon I'm like, holy shit, the level of athleticism and the time it must take to get to that level, even beyond the basic gymnastic level, like we're talking about, kind of the showmanship that it takes and the willingness to put that fucking time in. Holy fuck.
Yeah.
Newfound appreciation.
That's what I'm here for.
Thanks. Well, my friend, it's kind of getting late.
Yeah. It is. We're way past my bedtime.
Mine also. So on that note, I want to thank you for coming down.
You got it.
And being my third guest.
I'm a little concerned what this is going to end up sounding like.
It's going to sound good. I'm not worried about it. It's going to sound good. It was good. It was fun. I really appreciate it. I hope you had a good time.
Sound as ridiculous as I think I have sounded in some of those points I made, but we'll see.
No. You sound way more ridiculous.
Good, that's the plan.
All right, man. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, later. There you go, everybody. Another episode of Muzzle Punch. Thank you all for listening. I really enjoyed these conversations. It's only going to get better from here. Thank you again for your support. Hope you found the conversation as interesting as I did. Thanks again to Jeff for coming down, sitting down, and having a conversation with me. Check us out on muzzlepunch.com, and please go on to iTunes and subscribe. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Bye.